You arrive barefoot at the edge of dusk, where ancient silence curls around the coiled serpent. The light is syrupy, thick with gold and smeared pink, and it slips between the trees like a final exhale. You step carefully across dew-drenched grass toes, squishing gently in the cool damp, your footsteps hushed. All around the land breathes with the slow, grounded rhythm of somewhere that's waited a very, very long time. There it is, the Serpent Mound. From the ridge, you glimpse its full curve, an earthen snake more than 1,000 feet long, coiling in soft loops before ending in a wide oval head. No eyes, no tongue, just that stillness. And somehow, even though it's just shaped soil, it watches you. Not like a predator, more like an old librarian, silent, mildly curious, and deeply unimpressed by your sneakers. You start walking. Each step pulls you deeper into the spell. The Serpent Mound winds across a plateau in what's now called Ohio. But this was once a ceremonial heartland home to peoples whose names we barely remember. The builders lost, their language gone, their identity contested even now. Some say the Adena made it, others vote for the fort ancient culture. Some scholars suggest both, like a relay race through centuries, each group reshaping the coils to suit their own rituals. Historians still argue whether this was a burial site, an astronomical observatory, or a sacred path for initiations. Maybe it was all of those, maybe none. For now it is just you and it. You pause near the serpent's tail, which tapers off near a wooded glen. The ground rises and falls subtly, hear the faint undulations reminding you that even stillness has breath. Cicadas buzz in lazy intervals. A distant crow coughs out a rasp. You place your hand on the soil and close your eyes. The earth here isn't quiet. It hums. Not literally, don't worry, this isn't an alien abduction story yet, but something about the place vibrates low and old like the last chord of a forgotten song. Even skeptics have reported feeling oddly watched when alone on the ridge. You try to scoff, but your voice catches on your teeth. The mound wasn't discovered so much as stumbled upon. European settlers in the 1800s found the shape suspicious. Why would the land be mounded? So it took an amateur archaeologist with a hot air balloon, yes, really to sketch it properly. Only then did its full serpent form become obvious, a sinuous body, 7 coils, and an oval head, aligned suspiciously well with the setting summer solstice sun. You sit on the edge of the 4th coil, where the grass grows softer. A chipmunk flits past. You wonder what the people who built this saw in the stars above. Did they whisper prayers as they shaped the tale? Did they sing one mainstream fact radiocarbon, dating places, parts of the mound around 300 BCE? That's older than Julius Caesar. Think about that. While Rome was still getting its togas in a twist, someone here was crafting an earth serpent that would last 2,000 years, without cranes, without GPS, just hands, baskets, and belief. But here's a quirky twist. Some researchers argue that the site was built atop a meteorite impact crater. You heard that right. A massive cosmic event may have once punched the land where this mound now lies. Was it coincidence, or was the serpent meant to seal something below? And that leads us to a strange little question, one historians rarely ask. But children might, what spirit was buried in the Serpent Mound? You stretch out on the grass and imagine it, not a mummy, not a pharaoh, but maybe a priest or a dreamer or even an idea. An ancient person placed here to rest, surrounded by coils that tell time chased the sun and maybe protect us all from whatever fell from the sky. There's a tale among local tribes, whispered still, that the serpent was a guardian, a boundary keeper between realms. Not good, not evil, just awake. You hear a breeze sweep through the trees. You imagine it whispering something in a tongue too old to decipher. So you lie back, arms spread wide, as twilight thickens around you. The serpent doesn't move, but it doesn't have to. You've already stepped into its story. Beneath the earth lies a grave, older than Rome, its occupant, shrouded in mystery and meteorites. You shift your weight slightly, feeling the subtle firmness of the mound beneath your back. It isn't just dirt, it's layered, composed, every inch placed with ritual care. This isn't some casual heap, this is architecture. Intentional, every coil, every curve, an echo of hands you'll never shake. And below, somewhere in the belly of the serpent, is a burial. Not a modern grave with tombstones and tearful relatives. This is a resting place from an age when burial didn't mean closure, it meant transformation. A person laid in the earth wasn't gone. They were folded into the landscape. In some traditions, they became the land. You rise slowly, following the serpent's curve with cautious steps. There's no sign saying burial here, no marble slab pointing the way. But archaeologists have found signs, subtle soil disturbances, layers of ash, small pockets of charcoal and bone. Once they unearthed an ancient skeleton buried in a sitting position, legs crossed back straight, as if still meditating 1,000 years after death. Was that the spirit, the one buried here? Historians still debate the exact purpose of that particular grave. Was it ceremonial, symbolic, accidental? Some say it's not the serpent's main secret at all, just one layer of the mystery cake. Others argue it was a shaman or spiritual figure, someone whose presence marked this site as sacred ground. The burial predates most written language in this region, and yet the person interred, whoever they were, wasn't simply placed here for convenience. They were honored. Their grave formed a key point around which the entire serpent was oriented, a spiral of earth coiled around their silence. And now the fringe theory. You ready? Some believe the buried figure wasn't just human, that it wasn't human at all. Cue spooky music. A few fringe researchers, the kind who give TED Talks and wear crystal necklaces, propose the burial contains a celestial being, an emissary, a sky visitor, not exactly aliens, more like star messengers. They argue the site's alignment with solar and lunar events, the meteorite-rich soil, and the overall vibe, yes, that's cited, suggest the mound was a kind of cosmic beacon, both grave and gateway. Skeptical, good, stay that way. But remember this, the Serpent Mound sits smack in the middle of a 300 million year old crypto explosion structure. Translation, a meteor slammed into this area long before humans arrived. And over time the ground healed, but left behind magnetic anomalies and rich deposits of iron. Meteoric iron, you know, the kind used in ancient blades, sacred jewelry and burial goods. Some of the tools and artifacts found near the mound show unusually high iron content. Not enough to trigger metal detectors at the airport, but enough to make archaeologists raise eyebrows. Was the iron from Earth, or was it from the stars? And more curiously, was it used to bury someone who came from the stars? You glance around nervously. The trees are still. A hawk circles overhead, silent. It's probably nothing. Still, your imagination wanders. You picture an ancient traveler walking across the land long before roads, their hands full of sky metal, seeking a place to lay down their burden. You imagine them collapsing beneath a night full of unfamiliar constellations, whispering a name no one now remembers. Maybe the people who found them built the mound out of reverence or fear, or both. Back in the 1890s, early excavators dug into parts of the mound, some with science, others with shovels and bravado. One report noted an unusually shaped burial chamber, lined with stone filled with ash and bone fragments. Another claimed to find fragments of meteoritic rock deliberately placed near the body. And then those fragments disappeared, vanished into collections, trunks, basements, and whispers. The thing is, no one knows how many burials the mound once held. Much of the original structure has been eroded, flattened, or quietly looted. But every coil, every rise in the soil could be a whisper of someone or something placed there long ago. You squat near the head of the serpent, where the oval enclosure begins. Some say this oval is an egg. Others say it's a heart, or an eye, or a portal. You find yourself squinting into it like it might blink back. It doesn't, but you feel something, not malevolent, just present, like someone politely waiting for you to figure something out. The grass shifts in the wind, the sun melts lower on the horizon, so you sit again, this time near the place the early archaeologists claimed the central burial lay. No plaque, no stones, just soil, slightly raised. You place your palm flat on the ground and close your eyes. You imagine the buried spirit not as a ghost, but as a keeper, watching over the coils, letting you ask questions, not giving answers. You whisper softly, "Who were you?" No reply, just the soft rustle of wind and grass, and maybe, just maybe, a sense that someone hears you anyway. You follow the serpent's undulating form, learning how its gaze aligns with solstices and secrets. The air has cooled just enough to make the hairs on your arms rise like tiny diviners. As you walk, each curve of the mound rises gently to meet your feet, then dips again, like you're strolling along the body of some sleeping creature that might just blink if you step too hard. Don't worry, it's been asleep for a while. Probably. You reach the serpent's head, the broad oval formation that seems almost too perfect. Not natural, but not artificial in any modern sense either. Like someone spoke geometry into the dirt. You stand still, facing where the serpent looks, and it's staring at the sunset. More precisely, it's aligned with the summer solstice sunset, the longest day of the year, when the sun glides down into the earth at the perfect angle. Not by chance, not by accident. This was built with intention. This is your mainstream historical fact. Of the night, the serpent's head points directly at the spot where the sun sets during the summer solstice. Archaeologists have confirmed it. Engineers have modeled it. Surveyors have practically danced around the site with their little laser things. And it gets weirder. Each curve of the serpent's body, those graceful coils, matches up with lunar events. Some correspond to the moon's maximum and minimum rise points. Others may align with equinoxes or eclipses. There's debate, as there always is, but many believe the entire serpent functions like a massive earthen observatory, one that uses no moving parts, no glass lenses, just dirt, time, and cosmic patience. Historians still argue whether these alignments were intentional astronomy or poetic coincidence. Was this an ancient calendar, A place to mark seasons for planting, hunting, and ritual? Or did it track something more symbolic, like a spirit's passage through the stars? You bend down, touching the dark soil near the serpent's eye. There's nothing mechanical here. No gears. No polished brass. But the precision is staggering. These aren't lazy loops. They weren't shaped by erosion or guesswork. They're placed. And now a lovely fringe tidbit: some New Age enthusiasts believe the serpent doesn't just track the sun and moon, but pulses with telluric currents, earth energy lines, like natural power grids, crisscrossing the planet, all converging at sacred sites. Stonehenge, the pyramids, Machu Picchu, and here in southern Ohio, one particularly enthusiastic theory suggests the serpent was built to absorb energy from these ley lines during solstices, storing it in the ground like a battery. The kind of battery that powers vision quests, crop fertility, and possibly very niche yoga retreats. You chuckle, but quietly, because there is something electrical here. People have reported compasses going haywire when placed on the coils. Animals behave oddly. One man said his dog refused to step onto the mound at all, just planted its paws and stared, ears twitching, tail down. Like it saw something I couldn't, he'd muttered. You take a cautious step forward. Nothing happens. The earth stays quiet. The grass waves innocent as ever. But still you feel the alignment, not just of the serpent, but of yourself standing in the exact spot where sun and soil once shared secrets. You picture it a summer solstice thousands of years ago. People gathered along the coils, watching the sun lower into the serpent's mouth. Fires flicker, chants rise. A child tosses a bundle of sweetgrass into a pit of glowing embers. An elder raises a hand, eyes on the sun, and slowly it sets right between the eyes, a perfect moment, time pinned to place. You wonder how long it took to get the angle right, how many generations watched and waited, how many solstices passed before they said, "Here. This is the spot. The head goes here." You step back, feeling the curve of the land behind your heels. The serpent doesn't just mark time, it is time. Each coil a season, a breath, a pulse. A reminder that even dirt can tell stories if you know how to listen. And for the record, some argue the entire serpent is a map. That the coils represent a journey, spiritual, seasonal, or otherwise. The body loops through phases just like you do. Just like the moon. And in the end it stares at the sun. Not bad for a pile of dirt, huh? You sit again, letting your fingers trail across the grass. The sky is bruised purple now, and fireflies are starting to blink in the underbrush. You smile, you get it now. The serpent doesn't just lie there, it points, it waits, and it watches. The culture that shaped this earth vanished, but their bones whisper in Adena mounds across the valley. You rise with a soft groan, your joints mildly protesting the whole ancient earthwork adventure idea, and begin walking again, tracing the serpent's back with slow, steady steps. There's a gentleness to the land here, like even the dirt is trying not to wake someone. Just beyond the serpent's final coil, the ground flattens into a rolling slope that leads down toward the valley. You pause at the edge and peer outward. Trees crowd the distance. Mist is beginning to lift from the lowlands in those long, slow sheets that look like breath. Somewhere down there, hidden in fields and forests, are more mounds, dozens of them. Hundreds, actually, if you start counting in every direction. Round mounds, conical mounds, burial mounds, platform mounds, each one raised by hands now lost to the soil. And this is your historical anchor. Many of these are associated with the Adena culture, a pre-Columbian people who lived in this region from around 1000 BCE to 200 BCE. They left behind pottery stone tablets, pipes shaped like animals, and most impressively, their dead interred beneath great earthworks. The Adena didn't build cities, they built presence, a quiet, enduring presence, the kind that doesn't need skyscrapers, just grass and time. And here's the quirky bit, some of their mounds were layered like cakes, not just dirt, but alternating strata, clay, sand, gravel, ashes, almost as if they were baking the dead into the land with ritual care. And sometimes, right at the center of it all, a seated skeleton, legs drawn up, face pointed west. Why, West historians still debate whether the orientation signified a journey toward death, a connection to the setting sun, or something even more symbolic, perhaps a return to where their ancestors once emerged. You picture one of those burials, a person lowered into the earth while mourners watched silently. Maybe someone sang, maybe someone wept, maybe someone cracked a joke just to cut the tension. Humans haven't changed that much. The Adena were mound builders, yes, but not just for burials. Some mounds were ceremonial, some may have been for astronomical purposes, and others total mystery, like one mound filled with carefully arranged deer bones, no tools, no people, just a pile of rib cages positioned in a perfect spiral. Archaeologists scratched their heads so hard they practically excavated their own scalps. Was that a ritual? A sacrifice? Community barbecue gone very, very weird? You'll never know. But you can feel the echo of it. And now the serpent enters the story. Some scholars believe the Serpent Mound was first constructed by the Adena, at least in part. Beneath the coils, early excavations found a burial mound that fits Adena characteristics. Charcoal from that layer has been radiocarbon dated to around 300 BCE. That's right in their wheelhouse. But there's a twist because, of course, there is. The current form of the serpent, the graceful, sweeping curve we see today, might have been reshaped later by another group, the Fort Ancient culture, around 1000 CE. So the theory goes the Adena built the bones of the site, and then the Fort Ancient came along and carved those bones into a serpent's body. You nod, considering that kind of makes sense. Cultures build on each other's ruins all the time. Castles over Roman roads, churches over pagan temples, Taco Bells next to medieval battlefields. It's the circle of life, or at least of land development. But let's pause. If that theory is right, then the original builders, the Adena, may not have seen a serpent at all. They might have just made a mound, a sacred place, a burial. And then centuries later, another people came, felt the ancient hum beneath their feet, and said, there's something powerful here. Let's give it a shape we understand. Let's turn it into a snake. And not just any snake, a sky snake, a timekeeper, a spirit guardian. So now, when you stand on this ridge, you're standing on layers of time. Adena bones, fort ancient geometry, colonial graffiti, park service signs, layers, each one with a voice, a purpose, a little message whispered into the dirt and left behind. You look down the valley again. Somewhere out there, the bones of a woman who once tended fire for an Adena ritual are slowly dissolving into the soil. Nearby, the ghost of a boy who carried stones for the mound might still walk the riverbanks looking for the perfect pebble. You'll never see them, but you can feel them watching from the hills. You crouch and scoop up a small handful of soil. It's dark and loamy, flecked with quartz and something glittering. Could be mica, could be stardust. Could be a fragment of someone's dream ground into the earth over 1,000 years. You let it fall slowly through your fingers. The culture that shaped this earth is gone, but their bones are still here. Their hands pressed this dirt. Their breath once warmed this air, and their stories still waiting for someone quiet enough to listen. Strange minerals and fulgurite hint that the mound may mark a fallen star's resting place. Your feet are beginning to tingle as if the ground itself has sent up a slow current, not sharp, not unpleasant, just noticeable, like static before a storm. You pause and wiggle your toes against the cool soil, wondering if it's your imagination, or maybe the coffee from 6 hours ago has finally worn off. Whatever it is, it pulls you downward, so you kneel, fingers brushing the base of the mound. The dirt here isn't just dirt. It's scattered with glittery specks, mica, quartz, and little grains of what looks like crushed glass. But it isn't glass, not exactly. One particularly strange discovery near Serpent Mound was fulgurite. That's a fancy science word for fossilized lightning. Yes, lightning. When a bolt strikes sand or certain soil types, the heat can fuse particles into long, branching glass tubes, hollow and beautiful like underground tree roots made of crystal. They're rare, they're wild, and they've been found near this site. Some think it's just coincidence. Ohio does have storms after all, but others suspect something less ordinary. The Serpent Mound sits atop what's known as the Serpent Mound crater, a 5-mile-wide geological anomaly believed to be the scar of an ancient meteorite impact. Not from the last few centuries or even the last few millennia. This sucker hit the Earth roughly 300 million years ago, back when fish were inventing lungs and trees looked like broccoli on steroids. But the crater is real. It left behind cracked bedrock, unusual magnetic fields, and weird mineral traces, including iron-rich deposits that don't match the local geology. Something heavy, fast, and not from around here punched this place once, and the land never forgot. Historians still argue whether the people who built the mound knew this. Did they feel the magnetic anomalies? Did they notice the way compasses spun strangely on the ridgeline? Or was it pure intuition that brought them to this fractured, sacred scar? One theory proposes that they knew exactly what they were doing. Picture it long ago, a group of skywatchers, possibly a Dina or Fort Ancient, comes across this oddly energetic patch of land. The soil feels strange, fires burn hotter here, stones hum. And somewhere in the middle of this uncanny zone, someone digs and finds a chunk of iron embedded in the rock, not forged, not chipped, just fallen. That's your fringe fact. Some claim meteorite fragments were used in ceremonial tools or even buried with the dead here. Ancient cultures around the world prized meteoritic iron, Inuit knives, Egyptian beads, Chinese weapons. The sky gave metal and the people turned it into meaning. Imagine the awe. You've never seen iron before. Your world is stone, clay, wood, and bone. And then one day you pull something dark and heavy from the earth. It gleams, it sings when struck. It doesn't break. It's not from here. It's from up there. That's not just a rock. That's a gift. So maybe the mound isn't just a snake. Maybe it's a marker, a monument raised, not for a person, but for the star that fell. A grave for something not alive, but alive enough in the imagination. You reach into your pocket for a pebble you picked up earlier and weigh it in your palm. It's just a stone, but you start to wonder, how would you know if it wasn't? There are tales too strange ones.
Local legends sometimes speak of sky fire and the day the stars touched the land. Stories passed from tribe to tribe, reshaped like clay in different hands. One story, told in hushed tones, says that long ago the Great Spirit cast down a flaming serpent that coiled into the earth and burned the shape we now see. A meteorite or a god.
You look again at the mound and notice how the coils shimmer faintly in the last traces of daylight. Not glowing, not literally, but the mica embedded in the soil catches the light and scatters it like scales. That's not an accident. The builders added it, crushed mica mixed into the top layers. Sparkle was part of the design. This was meant to dazzle. Maybe to resemble a real serpent, maybe to lure something celestial, or maybe to say thank you to the thing that fell gift omen destroyer. You sit back on your heels and exhale slowly. There are places on Earth where the sky touches down. Not in bolts, not in storms, but in deep, slow collisions written into the soil. You're sitting on one now. Not just a mound, but a memory of something that came hurtling from the black above and changed the ground forever. And maybe, just maybe, the people who lived here decided to honor that impact with their own legacy.
A monument that would speak to the stars the way the stars once spoke to them. You close your eyes and listen. The ground isn't humming anymore, it's breathing. You lie awake beneath the serpent's head and slip into a dream stitched with ancient visions. The sky is almost fully dark now, just a thin trace of indigo lingering on the horizon like the breath of a vanishing thought. The fireflies have declared their tiny, silent war against nightfall, blinking their Morse code spells in the bushes. You ease yourself down again, just below the serpent's wide, enigmatic head. The grass is cold, not unfriendly, just honest. A kind of truth only soil can offer. Above you, stars prick through the night, one by one. First, the bright ones, bold and obvious. Then the shyer, quieter ones, the ones ancient stargazers knew by heart, their names now dissolved into dust and long-forgotten lullabies. You fold your arms behind your head, letting your breath match the rhythm of the earth. Inhale.
Pause. Exhale. Wait. And then without meaning to, you fall into that in-between place, not quite dreaming, not quite awake. A twilight of the mind, a voice distant and dry as sand whispers your name. Or maybe it's a name you used to wear before you wore this one. You're standing again, but now the sky is wrong. It's sharper. The stars pulse in odd configurations as if someone rearranged them while you blinked. There's fire on the horizon. Smoke curls like handwriting. A drum beats slowly but like the heartbeat of a thing too big to see. You look down. Your feet are bare, dusted with ochre. Your hands are not your own, they are younger or older. Someone presses a bundle into your arms. Feathers. Stones. A coil of braided cord. A voice instructs, walk the coils. Don't look back. So you walk. And now you are inside the serpent. Not metaphorically. Physically. The coils rise around you like walls each turn, swallowing you deeper into its spiral. People watch silently from the edges, figures with painted faces, eyes like stars. A child beats a rhythm on a hollowed gourd. A woman hums, eyes closed, swaying slightly. You don't speak, you just walk. Each turn of the serpent feels like a season. The air changes subtly cooler, warmer misted, with herbs, sharp with wood smoke. At one point, the sky opens directly above and you see a constellation you've never seen before, a snake with wings. Its tail touches the horizon. Its head drinks the moon. You reach the center. There's a mound here, too smaller than the real one, but pulsing with red light from within. You kneel, you place your bundle down. A voice behind you murmurs, "The stars remember, even if you forget." Then silence and darkness. You blink, and it's gone. The dream dissolves like smoke in wind, and you're back. The sky above you is full and familiar now. Orion's belt hangs lazily above the tree line. The Milky Way runs like spilled sugar across the night. Your limbs are heavy, but your heart is oddly light. And here's your historical anchor. Many indigenous tribes across North America practiced vision quests, often tied to sacred spaces and natural landmarks. A seeker, usually young, often alone, would fast isolate themselves and wait for signs, for spirits, for clarity. Dreams were not dismissed, they were a kind of language. Historians still argue whether the Serpent Mound was a destination for vision quests or merely symbolic, but oral traditions suggest it was more than a sculpture, it was a path. Some tribes called it a place of messages, though we no longer have the original words. And now for your fringe flavor, a small group of dream researchers. Yes, that's a job-studied reports from people who had slept on or near the Serpent Mound. Their conclusion: an unusually high frequency of lucid dreams and waking visions, more than typical camping trips. One woman described meeting a being made of stars who hummed in 7 notes. Another dreamt of being swallowed by a golden snake, only to emerge with glowing hands. Coincidence, suggestion, cosmic prank. Who's to say? You sit up slowly. Your back aches, but your chest feels open like someone aired out your lungs with a story you didn't know you needed. The ground is quiet again, but you swear just for a second that you can still hear the drumbeat from your dream. Faint, fading, ba-dum, a rhythm older than memory, stitched into the curves of a sleeping serpent. You touch an artifact that thrums with heat, was the buried one, adorned in sacred metal. Morning arrives, quietly, no fanfare. Just that soft grey breath of pre-dawn stretching across the sky and the gentle drip of dew slipping from leaf to earth. You've drifted in and out of sleep, the kind that's half dream, half history, and you feel like you've aged 5 centuries in one night. In a good way, you stand and stretch, bones cracking like the beginning of a new myth. The serpent's head where you slept now glows faintly with the light of early day. No magic, just physics. Probably. You decide to explore the eastern rise, near where early amateur archaeologists once dug into the coils with pick spades and far too much enthusiasm. Most of what they found has vanished into drawers and museum basements, but a few notes remain. One of them mentions a curious find, a length of hammered copper, coiled like a snake, buried near bone fragments and charred wood. No one knows where it went. But today, as you push aside tall grass and step carefully along the outer edge of the mound, your foot bumps something. You crouch. They're half buried in the dirt, and time-worn is a small twisted shape. Not rock, not wood, metal. You gently pry it free. The soil clings as if reluctant to let go. The object is small, maybe the length of your thumb, and shaped like a spiral. It's greenish with age, but unmistakably copper. And the moment it hits your palm, it warms. Not hot, not glowing, but warm. Like it remembers being held. You stare. Here's your mainstream anchor. Ancient Native American cultures across the Ohio Valley made extensive use of Great Lakes copper, hammering it into beads tools and ceremonial objects. Long before the invention of smelting, they shaped copper by cold hammering, pounding it carefully with stone tools until it took form. The metal was valued, yes, but not always for weapons. Often it was used for adornment ritual or to signal status. Copper earrings, copper armbands, even copper serpents. And there's more. Several burial sites from the Adena and Hopewell cultures, roughly in the same region and time frame, have yielded copper-covered bodies. Not like sarcophagi, but delicate adornments layered with intention. A curl at the wrist, a plate over the chest, sometimes a mask. Historians still debate whether copper served a spiritual function. Was it a symbol of sunlight blood transformation, or was it simply beautiful and rare? Some say it was both aesthetic and sacred, like the first song ever sung, but your little artifact, it might be something more. According to a delightfully speculative fringe theory, copper coils were used as energy vessels worn by priests or shamans to conduct spiritual power. Think copper bracelets for ancient soul alignment, or batteries for dreams. You chuckle softly, sounds ridiculous, until you hold it tighter and feel that odd, insistent warmth. It's not heat exactly, more like memory. Could this have belonged to the buried one? Maybe. Maybe it adorned their arm, curled like a serpent. Maybe it circled their neck or crowned their brow. Maybe it was pressed into their palm as they were lowered into the mound, a token for the journey ahead. In 1890, a team documented a burial beneath one of the serpent's coil's bones, arranged with copper beads, a few small stone tools, and what they described as an unknown emblem shaped like a flame. That artifact disappeared, of course. It always does. But some say it resembled a spiral not unlike what you're holding now. You press your thumb to the copper, nothing happens. Then again, maybe something already did. Copper conducts more than electricity. It also carries time. This little artifact has been underground for centuries, absorbing the weight of seasons, the whispers of root systems, the endless chatter of worms and rainfall. Now it's in your hand, and it's watching. You tuck it gently into your pocket. Yes, you're keeping it for now, don't worry. We'll talk about ethics later and continue walking. The sun is peeking through the trees now, painting streaks of gold across the ridgeline. Birds call in scattered bursts like sleepy priests greeting the dawn. You glance back at the serpent's head. You wonder, was the spirit buried here, adorned in copper, to shine in the afterlife, to glint beneath the stars they once watched, to signal the gods or become one? No answers. Just a warmth that doesn't fade, and a feeling that something ancient has taken your measure and smiled. Victorians once picnicked here, trampling relics while theorizing about lost continents. You make your way down the ridge now, skirting the serpent's final coil. The sky has slipped fully into morning, and the soft hush of twilight has been replaced by birds chattering like gossiping aunties. The sacred mood lingers, yes, but it's getting nudged aside by a more familiar forced daylight reality. And a bit of history's awkward side, because once upon a time, this ancient star-aligned spirit-humming Serpent Mound wasn't exactly treated like a holy site. It was a Victorian tourist attraction. You reach a clearing near the base of the hill where the grass lies flatter and the ground bears faint tire ruts. Not modern ones, no ATVs or food trucks here, but the long, slow carving left by wagon wheels and picnic benches. The ghost of a lawn party lingers. Yes, really. In the mid-1800s, the Serpent Mound became the place to be for Sunday strolls, romantic sketches, and deeply misinformed theories about ancient Atlanteans. You plop down onto a sun-warmed stone and shake your head. Imagine it parasols lemonade men in starched collars and absurd moustaches, waxing poetic about the mound builders, while balancing ham sandwiches on their knees. Here's your historical anchor. In the 19th century, many Americans, especially those of European descent, refused to believe that indigenous peoples had built these mounds. The structures were too precise, too vast, too intentional. So they invented an entire lost race, the mound builders. Supposedly a sophisticated, vanished civilization wiped out by the ancestors of the primitive tribes that white settlers encountered. Convenient, right? This myth was more than academic snobbery. It was political. If native peoples hadn't built the mounds, then they had no sacred claim to the land. The earthworks could be dismissed as relics from someone else's forgotten past, ready to be repurposed, paved over, or casually trampled by patent leather boots. Historians still argue whether some of the early excavators were innocently curious or willfully destructive. Probably both. Curiosity is a knife, it cuts through mystery, but also sometimes through meaning. And now, the fringe delight. A few of those Victorian theorists believed the Serpent Mound was the handiwork of refugees from Atlantis. Yep, that Atlantis. According to this view, when the fabled continent sank beneath the waves, its survivors fled to the Americas and began rebuilding their mystical knowledge. One well-heeled enthusiast even claimed the coils of the serpent matched a sacred wave pattern he'd seen carved into rocks on a Greek island. He published a pamphlet about it, complete with highly confident diagrams and zero actual evidence. Others went even further. The serpent was a dragon that encoded the lost star knowledge of Lemuria, another made-up continent often used as the spiritual cousin of Atlantis. Lemuria was the yoga-loving, spiritually pure, crystal-obsessed version of Atlantis, basically the Whole Foods of imaginary continents. And the serpent, a cosmic beacon, a signal left by the Lemurians to activate something. When soon, always soon. You smile because it's both ridiculous and oddly touching. Even among the worst picnic offenders, you can feel the yearning. They wanted meaning. They stood here just like you and felt something stir. Maybe they got the details wrong, very wrong, but the sensation, the pull, it was real. You imagine a couple in 1872 standing at the serpent's head. He's holding her hand awkwardly. She's wearing 3 layers of petticoats and silently hoping he doesn't propose with a compass. They both stare out at the coils. The sun sets, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, they forget the pamphlets and the theories. They just feel awe. Even now, some of those old trees still bear the initials carved by picnickers. HM plus LJ 1881, WT 1896, history within history, graffiti from ghost hands. And yet, for all their romantic misunderstandings, the Victorians did something important. They brought attention. Newspapers began writing about the mound. Early photographs were taken. Funding, small, started to trickle in. Eventually, the Serpent Mound was purchased by a preservation group and protected as a historical site. It survived. Not because people always understood it, but because they couldn't ignore it. You rise from the stone and brush off your hands. The sun is higher now. Somewhere a hawk screams across the sky, probably chasing a chipmunk that has no idea it's about to star in a nature documentary. The serpent remains still. And yet every person who walks here, every muddy boot, every lost hairpin, every whispered theory becomes part of its layered skin, even the ones who thought it was built by Atlanteans. A distant tremor recalls an old tale. The serpent rose to defend the land from cosmic fire. You're back near the head of the mound, now sipping water and watching clouds drift like lazy animals across the noon sky. A breeze curls up from the valley, rustling the leaves, just enough to sound like hushed voices, or maybe they are voices whispering very old stories that nobody's written down. And then it happens. A tremor, small but real, the kind that makes the water in your bottle ripple, the kind that tickles the soles of your feet in a way that says something deep just shifted. You freeze. A bird's pause mid-chirp. Even the breeze stops talking. It lasts maybe 2 seconds, and then nothing, just stillness. You laugh nervously, probably a mild tectonic hiccup. These things happen, but still you glance around like someone just called your name from underground. And here's your historical core. The region around Serpent Mound is geologically unstable. Not California level shaky, but surprising for Ohio. Small earthquakes have been recorded here for over a century, including a notable one in 1986 that rattled windows and unsettled nerves. Geologists attribute this to the ancient impact crater. The cracked bedrock below has long been a zone of quiet tension. But that hasn't stopped stories from rising alongside the science. One indigenous tale long passed through oral tradition tells of a time when the land shook for days and the sky burned. The elders say the earth cracked open and fire poured from the clouds. Animals fled, trees burned without lightning. The people gathered at the coils of the great serpent, praying for mercy. And then from the mound the serpent rose. Not physically, not like a special effects scene with ground-ripping CGI, but spiritually, energetically. A massive, shimmering form rose from the soil part, smoke part, light part will, and wrapped itself around the village, protecting it from the cosmic firestorm. When the fire passed, the serpent lay still again, but it was never just dirt after that. Historians still argue whether this story refers to a real meteor event, a series of wildfires, or something metaphorical. But here's where it gets weirder. Some researchers believe a comet may have fragmented over North America around 800 years ago, triggering massive wildfires, floods, and atmospheric changes. It's called the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, and it's still hotly debated. Guess where some of the theoretical comet fragments are thought to have struck? Right around this region. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the people who built the mound knew something had happened here long before them. Maybe the fire was already legend by the time the first coil was shaped. And here comes the fringe detail to tie it all together. One speculative theory claims that the Serpent Mound wasn't built in response to a single cosmic event, but to prevent another. That it serves as a kind of ritual seal, a planetary acupuncture point placed precisely on a scar in the earth to keep whatever fell from returning. You smile. That's dramatic. Delightfully dramatic. But also standing here where you just felt the ground shiver, it doesn't sound entirely implausible. You sit down again and press your palm to the grass. Warm, slightly damp, silent. You picture the fire from the old story, sky bleeding, light people screaming, shadows stretching too long. And then out of the earth, a shape. Serpent-shaped, towering not of flesh, but of force.
Coiling through the stars like smoke through water. It doesn't fight, it watches, it surrounds, and whatever's coming turns back. It's myth, of course, but myths have staying power for a reason. They anchor something real even if the details get dreamy. You lie back on the soil again and stare upward. Maybe the serpent isn't here to defend the land. Maybe it is the land, the guardian that doesn't need to move to protect, the watcher that only stirs when the world forgets it exists. And maybe, just maybe, your little tremor wasn't an earthquake. Maybe the serpent was stretching. The coils tell time more precisely than sundials, tracing seasons like an ancient calendar. Still on your back, you squint at the sky, where the sun has started its slow descent westward. It's not hurrying, it never does. It knows exactly where it's going. And if the serpent has anything to say about it, it's going to make that arrival spectacular.
You roll over onto your side, propping yourself on one elbow. From this angle, the mound's full body flows ahead of you, its loops rising gently, like soft hills, frozen mid-breath. It doesn't just look graceful, it feels organized, like the earth got tired of being chaotic and decided to coil itself neatly just this once. Here's your mainstream anchor. Numerous studies over the last century have revealed that the Serpent Mound's 7 main coils appear to align with significant solar and lunar events, most notably the solstices, equinoxes, and the moon's extreme rise and set points during its 18.6-year cycle. And this wasn't guesswork. Whoever shaped these coils did so with the kind of astronomical precision that would make a modern telescope blush. This was prehistoric math, long game observation, a culture that watched the sky not just for weather, but for meaning. You imagine a circle of people standing where you are now centuries ago, watching the sun pour itself slowly into the serpent's open mouth. They nod, not because they're amazed, but because they expected it. This was the plan. This always happens here. You push up to your feet and begin walking the loops. Not randomly, you follow the flow, tracing the path like a needle through celestial thread. With each curve, you imagine the seasons passing. The first loop, early spring. Budding leaves, restless geese, children racing barefoot for the first time in months. The second loop, summer's height. Lush green insects thick in the air, drums echoing in a long ceremony night. Third, autumn. Smoke from the hearth roots lifted from the soil, the smell of drying corn. Fourth, winter. The coil narrows, the sun dips lower, breath fogs in the cold air as silence returns. Historians still argue whether the mound was meant to be walked ceremonially, like a labyrinth. There's no stone path, no markers. But then again, some things aren't built to be seen, they're built to be felt. And the serpent, it feels like a clock. Not the tick-tock kind, the kind that breathes, a spiral calendar that doesn't just mark days, but invites you into them. Now for the fringe flavor. A small but enthusiastic group of researchers claims that the mound is not just a calendar, but a cyclical prophecy machine. Their theory, each coil corresponds not only to seasons, but to phases in an eternal pattern, birth, growth, decay, renewal, not just in nature, but in culture, spirit, and civilization. One proponent even suggested the coils matched patterns found in Vedic cosmology, Tibetan mandalas, and Mayan calendars. His book, Coiling Through Time, has a cover featuring a golden snake wrapped around the moon, staring meaningfully into a clock made of corn. It did not win any major awards, and yet, standing here, it's hard to dismiss the logic completely. You stop near the fifth coil and crouch low. From this spot, if you draw a line with your arm pointing outward, it matches the sunrise angle of the spring equinox. At least that's what the surveyor's notes claimed. And you believe it. The sun has a way of doing what it's supposed to when ancient dirt tells it to. Some cultures believe time moves in a circle, others in a spiral. But the serpent suggests something more intimate, that time might move like breath in and out, forward and back, always returning, always continuing. You exhale slowly. The coil beneath you doesn't twitch or pulse, but it hums in its own way, the hum of seasons stored in soil, of years tracked in looped silence. You picture someone long ago, kneeling where you are, now measuring shadow lengths with a stick and a gut feeling, recording nothing, remembering everything, and maybe leaving the shape of those memories behind. You walk again. Each loop takes you closer to something, not the end, but maybe the middle, or maybe just back to where the next cycle begins. And when you reach the final loop, the serpent's tail curved inward like a question mark. In the dirt you pause. You've just walked through time, and it fits you perfectly. You see a shadow that flickers like firelight, guardian spirit trick of light or something else. It starts small, a shimmer. Not the magical kind, no fairy dust, no sparkles, just a brief ripple in the air ahead of you as if heat rose unexpectedly from the earth. But it's cool now. The sun has dipped behind the trees and the late afternoon leans toward early dusk. There's no reason for heat shimmer, no campfires, no cars, just that flicker. Gone as quickly as it arrived. You freeze mid-step, 1 foot still, on the low curve of the serpent's back. For a moment you convince yourself it was a trick of the light sunlight filtered through a leaf, maybe. Your brain reaching for rationality like a seatbelt. Then it happens again. This time it's not just a shimmer, it's a shape, tall, thin, a little too straight to be a tree, a little too still to be a breeze. You blink and it's gone. Again, let's just say you're paying attention now. You move slowly, part curiosity, part cautious respect. The mound rises slightly where you stand, and from this spot you can see most of the coils stretching away behind you, winding like a silent river made of earth and intent. Then the shape returns just at the edge of your vision. A flicker, a figure. This is the part where your rational brain throws up its hands and walks away for the night. Because you've read about this. Here's your mainstream note. Multiple visitors over the years have reported seeing a figure near the Serpent Mound at twilight. Descriptions vary slightly. Some say it's cloaked. Others call it a silhouette. But the consistency is eerie, tall, upright, motionless, watching. Park staff, of course, chalk it up to optical illusions or overactive imaginations. But even a few rangers have admitted off record that they've seen something weird during their patrols. Usually just once. Usually just around dusk, like now. And now, for your fringe dose, some believe this presence is the guardian of the mound, a spirit left behind by the original builders. Not malicious, not even particularly chatty, just present, bound by purpose, still doing its job. A few local legends even give it a name, Watcher in Shadow. Some call it the Keeper between loops. And one particularly poetic storyteller once dubbed it the memory that looks back. You like that one. Standing perfectly still, you scan the trees. Nothing. Just the rhythmic pulse of cicadas, the warm smell of sun-dried grass, and the long, slow hush of evening. Then out of the corner of your eye, you see it again. No movement. Just a flicker of presence. You take a cautious step forward. And as you do, the mound feels different, not threatening, not alive, just aware. Like a stage that knows you're on it. Like an eye that chooses not to blink. You reach the edge of the 7th coil, the final turn before the serpent's tail, and pause. Nothing. But you can't shake the feeling that someone or something is watching. Not with malice, not even with curiosity. Just with quiet persistence, like it's taking attendance. You sit. Sometimes the best thing you can do with a mystery is stop chasing it. The light fades gently and the shadows deepen. Trees grow longer. The wind hushes. You almost forget why you sat down until you glance again toward the western tree line. And there it is. This time it's clearer. A dark shape, not moving, not waving, just there. You stare. It doesn't move. You blink, and it's gone. You exhale slowly. Maybe it never was there. Maybe it always is. Historians still argue whether indigenous traditions about mound spirits are symbolic or literal. Were these guardians just metaphors for memory, for continuity, for the sacredness of place? Or were they real spirits meant to remind you that old places are still watching? You rise to your feet quietly and bow your head, not in fear, not in submission, but in thanks, for the silence, for the presence, for the watching. And as you walk away from the 7th coil, you feel the mound settling behind you, not closing, not vanishing, just resting, until the next watcher passes by. Before scholars could document them, bones and trinkets were plundered by gentlemen antiquarians. You continue along the western edge of the Serpent, now moving slowly like someone walking through a room full of sleeping ancestors. The earth feels softer underfoot, more yielding, like it remembers being opened, disturbed, rearranged, and not just once. This part of the mound holds scars. Not visible ones, not the kind marked by fences or plaques, but beneath the surface the soil tells a quieter, sadder story, one of shovels, journals, and gentlemen with interests. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, archaeology had a more dashing reputation. Less lab coats and careful brushstrokes, more monocles, field whiskey, and brass-handled spades. And the Serpent Mound, well, it was irresistible. Here's your historical truth. During the late 19th century, the mound was excavated multiple times by curious settlers, amateur collectors, and self-styled scientists who often saw themselves as romantic adventurers uncovering lost secrets, except, without asking permission from the land or its descendants. They dug trenches, poked through coils, took artifacts home in their coat pockets. Some even sold what they found. Many of these so-called explorations were documented with maddening vagueness. Found a few bones, fragmentary, perhaps human. Recovered copper items of unclear origin. Sent to private collection for safekeeping. Ah yes, for safekeeping. Historians still argue whether this early looting was born of ignorance, arrogance, or simple greed. Most likely a mix of all three. The Smithsonian itself conducted a more formal excavation in the 1880s, led by Frederick Ward Putnam, a name you'd recognize if you spent enough time reading dusty field reports. Putnam was more careful than the relic hunters, and he did try to preserve the site. But even he disturbed burial layers in ways modern archaeologists wince at. And then there were the private collectors. Dozens of small, unrecorded digs took place along the mound's length. Locals would boast about having an Indian bone or a charm from the serpent displayed in their parlors like conversation pieces. Some even wore pendants carved from grave goods, yes, really. That's not just bad taste, it's spiritual identity theft. You crouch near a patch where the grass grows slightly discolored, lighter, dry looking like a faded bruise. According to a map drawn in the 1930s, this is where one of the early antiquarian pits was dug. No plaque, no marker, just a quiet wound in the earth, now hidden beneath a blanket of years. You reach down and brush your fingers through the topsoil. Nothing. But maybe not nothing, just absence. Absence has weight too. It's easy to forget that every artifact pulled from the earth is part of a sentence. And when you remove it without understanding, without context, without care, you break that sentence in half. You turn poetry into gibberish. That's what happened here. The lost bones, the missing beads, the copper spirals that once lay beside someone's ribcage. They were more than pretty objects. They were punctuation, markers of meaning, pieces of a ritual story no one wrote down. And now they sit in drawers, in trunks, in mislabeled boxes under staircases. And still the mound waits. You rise wiping soil from your hands. You don't blame the earth for being quiet. You wouldn't talk either if someone had stolen your words. There's a fringe whisper too. One old journal written by a local farmer in 1911 claims he saw men digging in the tail end of the Serpent at night, lanterns swaying coats buttoned tight. When he approached, they said they were measuring soil displacement. He returned the next day and found a hollow, half-filled hole and the smell of smoke. The men were gone. What did they take? No one knows. You walk along the curve of the next loop, slower now, more reverent. The wind shifts. A leaf falls from a nearby oak tree and spirals to the ground like a tiny amber prayer. It lands exactly where you stepped. You pause, then step aside. Because this part of the mound isn't just a monument. It's a wound with a memory. And the earth, it turns out, remembers who asked kindly and who didn't. Missionaries once tried to reshape the coils into a more civilized symbol. Guess how that ended? You shake the dust from your hands and keep walking. The grass is shorter here, thinned by wind or foot traffic or time itself. You pass a small rise where the serpent's curve tightens unnaturally as though bracing for something. A place that feels like breath held mid-prayer. And you can almost hear it, that old, uneasy tension between what was sacred and what someone tried to fix. Because not everyone who came here saw the serpent with wonder. Some came with Bibles, with good boots, with righteous certainty. And they looked at this vast, looping monument to sky and earth and time and thought, we should turn this into a cross. You sigh, yep, that actually happened. Here's your historical anchor. In the 1800s and early 1900s, Christian missionaries and colonial reformers frequently sought to reinterpret or outright destroy indigenous sacred sites. They weren't subtle about it. They saw traditional spiritual systems as obstacles to conversion and sacred earthworks as pagan relics best forgotten or overwritten. The Serpent Mound, with its sinuous form and mysterious alignments, gave them particular heartburn. A few documents, mostly letters preserved in musty historical society archives, suggest that attempts were made to redefine the mound. One suggestion, carving a trench across its head and arms to shape it into a cruciform. Another even proposed flattening the loops to form an elongated fish, the ichthys, an early Christian symbol. Because obviously nothing says respectful dialogue like reshaping a 2,000-year-old snake into lunch. Historians still argue whether these proposals were ever truly carried out, or if they stalled out as aggressive ideas that never made it past church meeting notes. But there is some evidence, minor disturbances in the grass altered soil layers, that something was done. Not full erasure, but a kind of theological landscaping. The mission was clear: erase the serpent, or failing that, convert it, which of course didn't work. Because the serpent doesn't bend for sermons, it watches. One legend from the early 20th century says that a missionary who brought a group of boys to reclaim the mound suffered an accident. Nothing tragic, just strange. As the story goes, he tripped over a tree root while giving a speech about idol worship and fell face first into a patch of poison ivy. Swelled up like a blasphemous balloon. Left town 2 days later. Coincidence? Sure. But the local kids called that root the snake's tongue for decades afterward. You smile at that, the serpent's quiet little revenge. And here's your fringe flavor. Some modern-day spiritual practitioners believe the serpent's shape acts as a protective symbol, not just for the land but for itself, like a built-in ward. They say any attempt to reshape or defile the mound leads to, if not curses, at least a good old-fashioned case of cosmic inconvenience. Flickering lights, lost items, bad dreams, sprained ankles, nothing fatal. Just annoying enough to make the message clear: don't mess with the coils. As you walk now, the air feels lighter, as if the mound itself has relaxed. It doesn't mind you here. You're not trying to rearrange its bones into something it never was. You pause at the outer loop and run your hand along the grass. It's thicker here, untouched. You imagine those would-be redesigners standing on this spot blueprint in one hand, Bible in the other, looking over the coils with a mixture of dismay and holy ambition. Then you picture the serpent watching silently, waiting, and deciding no. Because the truth is, you can't carve a spirit into a new shape just because it doesn't match your map. The mound isn't trying to offend, it's just old and wild and exactly as it needs to be. You step gently over a small patch of wildflowers growing where one of those old corrective trenches was once rumored to be. You smile, because the snake always grows back. You trace the curves and wonder, are these the stars seen by a vanished people evening again? The light goes honey soft as the sun begins its final descent behind the trees. You're seated at the midpoint of the serpent's spine where the land dips ever so slightly, a quiet subtle ripple like a breath drawn in and held. From here the mound unfurls in both directions, head and tail horizon to horizon. You tilt your head back and look up. The sky is coming alive. First a single star, then another. Soon they pour through like water through lace. And you begin to see something else, a pattern. Not just up above, but down here, mirrored in dirt and grass. What if the serpent isn't just a calendar? What if it's a map? Here's your historical foundation. Many indigenous cultures across North America used stars not only for navigation, but as sacred symbols, stories told in constellations, ceremonies synced to celestial cycles. The Hopewell and Adena cultures often associated with the Serpent Mound left behind pipes, tablets and carvings that depict cosmic imagery, suns, moons, stars and abstract forms we can only guess at. Scholars have compared the serpent's curves to certain constellations. Draco, the dragon that coils around the north celestial pole, is one of the most frequently sighted. It's visible year-round in the northern hemisphere, winding around Polaris, the North Star. From some angles, the mound seems to echo Draco's twist. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's a persuasive one. Historians still argue whether the builders intended this as a literal star map or a symbolic echo of celestial movement. Some argue for metaphor, others for geometry. And others still whisper that perhaps it was both a harmony of heaven and earth, written in loops and lines. You lie back on the grass again and raise your hand, letting your fingers draw invisible curves from star to star. The sky doesn't give easy answers, but the longer you stare, the more it begins to bend to your curiosity. Now the fringe thought a handful of researchers and sky-watching mystics believe the Serpent Mound was designed to mark not just stars, but cosmic visitors, meteors, comets, things that move strangely. One theory holds that the oval at the serpent's head represents not an egg, but a celestial object, something that approached Earth and was witnessed, even worshipped. Others claim the entire form is a sky event map, encoding a memory of a meteor shower or even a supernova. A few have linked the mound to the Cygnus constellation, the Northern Cross, because in some years, during the summer solstice, Cygnus aligns perfectly above the serpent's mouth at dusk. You glance skyward again. Cygnus, the swan. It soars straight across the Milky Way like a spirit gliding through the other world. You imagine a ceremony from long ago, people gathered at dusk, looking skyward, watching Cygnus rise, torches flicker, drums pulse. A priest or priestess raises arms to the sky and chants names of stars, of ancestors, of animals made of light, and then the people look down and see the same pattern traced in the earth beneath their feet. Sky above, sky below. You think about how disorienting it must have been, beautifully so, to live in a world where heaven and soil reflected each other, where every falling star might be a message, every curve of the mound a mirrored signature from above. You rise and walk the nearest coil, matching each step to an imagined star.
1 foot for Deneb, 1 for Vega, 1 for Altair. The summer triangle shining above and echoed below. This is the kind of map you don't read with your eyes, you read it with your feet, with your breath, with your patience. And it doesn't take you to a place, it brings you to a moment. Time and space converge here, quietly wrapped in loam and silence. The ancients didn't need telescopes, they had memory and rhythm and reverence. They watched long enough to know. You pause at the last loop before the serpent's head and look up one final time. The stars pulse like the tips of ancient spears. The Milky Way flows like sacred paint spilled across black canvas. And in that moment, you're no longer a visitor. You're part of the constellation, above and below, looped into the story. You smell ash in the soil and recall how ancient rites fed the sky with fragrant offerings. You wake before dawn again.
The sky is still a deep violet like bruised silk, and the stars have begun to blink away one by one. But something in the air is different today. Not cold, not windy, just heavy. Not ominous, just expectant. You step carefully down the eastern slope of the mound's midsection. The ground here is darker, richer, more compact. You dig your heel in lightly and notice something unusual, a faint scent rising from the soil. Not dampness, not grass, smoke, old smoke, the kind that's been asleep for centuries but stirs when the air gets just right. You crouch and dig with your fingers brushing away blades of grass, then a thin layer of soil, and there it is, a vein of ash, grey-black, fragile, a powdery stripe running parallel to the mound's curve. You're not the first to find this. Here's your historical anchor. Archaeological digs at and around the Serpent Mound have uncovered layers of burned soil and ash, often concentrated near particular coil bends and high points on the ridge. The These aren't the leftovers of accidental fires, they're structured, intentional. Some believe they mark the spots of ceremonial fires, offerings to the sky, the sun, the ancestors. There's evidence of ritual burning at many Hopewell and Adena sites, charred wood, scorched stones and bones discoloured by flame. Often these were associated with burial mounds where fire served as a final rite, a signal, a bridge. Historians still debate the function of these fires. Were they for purification, communication, celebration? Or maybe they were the ancient version of voicemail. Hi ancestors, just checking in. Here's a little seed of smoke to say we miss you. You sit back on your heels, rubbing the ash between your fingers. It's fine, silky, and oddly cool. Not a trace of heat left, but it holds the memory of flame. And now the fringe scent. A few modern-day practitioners who conduct sky ceremonies near the mound believe the soil still remembers the smoke. They claim that on certain days, solstices, equinoxes, or seemingly random mornings like this one, the earth exhales the smell of old fires, offering up a quiet hello from deep time. You inhale again. The smell isn't strong, just a whisper. You imagine it mixed with the scent of sweetgrass or tobacco plants often used in indigenous rituals as offerings. They weren't just burned for aroma. Each one carried meaning. Tobacco was a messenger. Sweetgrass was a blessing. Sage was protection. So maybe this ash beneath your feet is more than evidence of a bonfire. Maybe it's a... You lean forward and press your palm flat to the earth. The soil's warmth has nothing to do with sun. It's deeper than that. It's the warmth of memory tucked into the coils like a secret still smouldering after 1,000 winters. You close your eyes and let the scene unfold, a circle of figures dressed in hides and feathers, stones arranged in a careful ring. A low fire crackling in the center, smoke curling upward in deliberate strands. One person stands holding a small bowl of crushed cedar and dried roots. They scatter it into the flames. The smoke changes, it turns blue, then white, then invisible. Everyone watches, and then together they raise their voices softly, not in song, but in that wordless chant that sounds like breath, drawn out and braided with meaning. Above them the stars shift. The fire is an offering, the smoke a signal, the earth a receiver. You open your eyes. The ash has settled back into silence. You rise and brush the dirt from your hands, careful not to smudge the memory too much. You continue along the next coil, and though you see no fire, you notice the wind carries a faint sweetness now. Something herbal, something old, not perfume, not incense, a memory, burned into the skin of the earth, rising every so often to remind you that before people wrote things down, they let them drift upward on smoke. Some messages aren't meant to be read, only breathed. In a flashback, a young shaman in training walks the coils guided by visions and trembling hands. You pause near the 6th coil where the land dips slightly and the grass grows thicker, wilder, as if no one stepped here in a while. The shadows grow longer again, that warm gold hour when everything stretches and softens, when even your own outline feels like someone else's. You sit, slowly. The earth receives you with that familiar hum, and before you can stop it, your breath slows. You blink once, and the dream begins. No drumbeat this time. No shimmering figures. Just a shift, subtle, silent, like stepping backward into a memory that isn't yours but somehow fits anyway. You're not you anymore. Your hands are smaller, your skin warmer, younger, you're barefoot, standing at the tail of the serpent, gripping something in your right fist, a pouch of crushed stones and herbs tied with a piece of sinew. Your fingers tremble, not from cold, from responsibility. The elder had said it plainly. Tonight you walk the coil alone. Let the earth tell you who you are. So you do, one step, another. The tail behind you fades into shadow. Ahead the coils curve inward like a riddle, each bend a question. You aren't allowed to carry fire, no light, no company, just instinct. And the sky. The stars are already out. You glance upward as you walk and whisper the names you've been taught. Turtle's eye. Old woman's hand, the path of the snake that swims the sky. This is your test, not of strength, not of hunting skill, but of vision. Not what you see with your eyes, but what you feel with your feet. You reach the second coil and the wind shifts. It's colder here, but not unkind. Your pouch feels heavier. You open it. The herbs are warm. One of them, the sacred root, is pulsing faintly with heat. You scatter a pinch onto the ground. You whisper thanks. A cloud moves across the moon. When it passes, you see something standing in the grass ahead. Tall, thin, wrapped in shadow. You don't run. This is part of it. The figure doesn't speak, just lifts one hand, slow, patient, and points toward the next coil. You bow. You walk. This is what being chosen feels like. Not applause, not triumph, just walking, coil by coil, letting the land unwrap itself inside your skin. At the fourth bend, you stop. You've been told this is the oldest part. Beneath it, a burial, not just bones, a spirit that still listens. You kneel, you press your forehead to the earth, and you feel it. Not a voice, a pulse, like someone breathing beneath the dirt, like someone waiting. You reach into your pouch and pull out a feather black and white tipped in ochre, a hawk's gift. You place it on the ground. The wind lifts slightly, the feather doesn't move, but you feel something shift inside your chest. A knot loosens, a doorway opens, and you know you are meant to carry stories.
Not tell them, carry them. Somewhere behind you, the sky begins to lighten. The dream is fading. You reach the serpent's head and turn to face the sunrise. Your feet are numb, your mouth is dry, but your hands are steady now. You close your eyes and the vision dissolves, the memory ends. You blink again, you're back, your own hands, your own breath, but still. That sense remains, that someone once walked these coils before you, not in search of knowledge, not chasing answers, just listening, coil by coil, step by step, letting the earth speak. And tonight maybe it whispered just loud enough for you to hear. Their calendar may have tracked lunar eclipses, was the buried one, a keeper of cosmic time. You walk the coils now with a slower rhythm, not tired, not exactly, just softened, as if the vision from before left a residue, something gentle, curling behind your ribs, like a thought that's still deciding whether to become a memory. The sky above is clear again.
The sun's slanting low, and already the moon is rising pale and full-bodied, like a quiet witness drifting up from behind the trees. She's early tonight, but she has her reasons. You pause and look up. The moon hangs perfectly between two coils, its light brushing the grass in silver brushstrokes. It's a visual alignment that feels almost staged, like the land and sky are rehearsing something. You tilt your head. Wait a second. Could the coils actually track the moon? Here's your historical anchor. Many researchers believe that the Serpent Mound doesn't just mark the summer solstice sunset, it also aligns with major lunar events, particularly those related to the 18.6-year lunar standstill cycle. That's when the moon rises and sets at its most extreme points on the horizon, something visible only if you're watching closely and patiently for nearly 2 decades. In other words, a long game lunar clock. You stare at the moon again, now just brushing the edge of the next curve. You step forward following its path with your body, then pause again. The layout. It does seem to trace her arc. Historians still argue whether the builders intended these alignments or stumbled upon them through myth and seasonal memory. But given their deep relationship with sky cycles, agriculture, and ritual timing, it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume someone was keeping track. Which brings us to the buried one. What if the person laid beneath this mound wasn't just a spiritual figure or ceremonial elder? What if they were a timekeeper? Not with gears or sundials, but with sky knowledge, a human calendar, someone whose role was to watch the moon, note its swelling and shrinking, its eclipses, its strange games with shadow and reflection. Someone who understood not just the phases, but the moods of the moon. Some cultures believed such people were dreamers, not scholars. They didn't calculate the future, they felt it. Their bones were said to ache before eclipses. Their dreams turned black and white. Birds landed on their shoulders without fear. In certain tribal cosmologies, lunar eclipses were seen as battles between light and darkness, or moments when the moon passed into the world of the dead. Only trained visionaries could interpret these events, marking them not as omens of doom, but as checkpoints in a cosmic cycle. There's even evidence that some Adena-era mounds were built with lunar alignments in mind. One in particular, located not far from here, was oriented precisely toward the northern lunar standstill point. And here's your fringe twist. Some claim the Serpent Mound was constructed to reset the lunar cycle, like a sacred reset button pressed every 18.6 years to realign the Earth, Moon, and spirit realms. During such standstills, gatherings may have occurred, silent rituals, fires lit, bundles offered. The buried one may have presided over these, not as a priest barking orders, but as a still figure at the center, watching the moon slip behind shadow, not afraid, just counting. You sit cross-legged near the fourth coil facing the rising moon. You picture a person wrapped in feathers and copper seated on a stone mat, surrounded by the coils. People sit in silence around them, no torches, just starlight. Then slowly the moon begins to dim, not behind clouds, but from the Earth's shadow swallowing her. And that person, the timekeeper, watches without blinking. The eclipse passes. The silence breaks, not with applause, but with breath. The cycle has turned. And now that same person rests beneath your feet, their body no longer warm, but their roles still active. Because the serpent still counts, the moon still moves. And you, for a moment, are part of that quiet machinery. You rise again, the silver light of the moon casting your shadow long against the grass. And you whisper, just loud enough to be heard, still counting, no answer. Just the sound of a distant owl. And the sky turning. You glimpse the grave goods of prestige, tools for ceremony, not war. It's fully night now, but the dark doesn't feel empty. It feels thick, like velvet drawn gently across the land. The moon glows high above, bathing the mound in soft silver. The shadows have edges, but not sharp ones, just the kind that whisper, "There's more here than you can see." You walk carefully along the eastern coils, your flashlight still untouched in your pocket. The moon gives you enough, and maybe it's better not to interrupt whatever's happening with LED brightness. You pause again near a small rise, a low hump beside the main loop. almost hidden under grass. You'd nearly missed it earlier. But now in this light, the angle reveals a slight dip in the ground, not a mound itself. More like a memory of one. You kneel, fingertips brushing the soil, and your mind slips into imagining what once lay here. Not a warrior, not a hunter, a different kind of prestige. Here's your historical anchor. In several excavations of Adena and Hopewell burial sites, cultures believed to be connected to the Serpent Mound, researchers discovered grave goods not designed for battle, but for ritual, tools for ceremony, symbols of status not earned by conquest but by connection to the cosmos. Pipes carved into the shape of birds and bears, stone tablets etched with spirals and abstract forms, clay vessels with smoothed lips and geometric patterns, small bundles of herb seeds and ochre. These weren't leftovers, these were offerings, and they told you everything about the buried one. Historians still argue whether these ceremonial goods belonged to spiritual leaders, shamans, clan elders, or something we don't have modern language for. But the consistency of the artifact tells us these were not the graves of soldiers. These were the resting places of people whose power came from knowing, not from fighting. You dig a little in the soft dirt, not deep, just enough to press your palm flat. You imagine holding one of those carved pipes, smoothed by hands, maybe passed down for generations. Not for tobacco necessarily, but for sacred plants, perhaps sumac or red willow. The smoke not exhaled but offered. A fringe theory here adds a whisper of wonder. Some researchers believe these ceremonial tools were also sound instruments. That pipes weren't always meant for smoke, but for tone blown like flutes, their curved channels creating resonant notes used in chant or trance. One pipe uncovered not far from here was shaped like a coiled serpent itself, mouth agape, tongue outstretched. When blown, it produced a low, warbling hum, a sound that might have echoed across the coils in ritual silence. A call, or an answer. You close your eyes and try to imagine it. A moonlit gathering, figures wrapped in animal skins and woven grass. The slow beat of a drum. Someone walks the serpent's coils, pausing at each bend, lifting a pipe to their lips and blowing a single note. A low sound, hollow, steady, echoing over the valley like breath held too long. And at the center, seated on a mat, the person buried here, not moving, just listening, because the power didn't come from speech. It came from silence, not absence, presence. You press your palm harder into the soil, and for a second, only a second, you feel the faintest vibration. Gone. Just like that, you pull your hand back, and maybe you're imagining it, but your fingers smell faintly of smoke and sweetgrass. You rise carefully, brushing off your knees, and glance up at the stars. They haven't moved, but somehow they seem more alert. Like they too are listening. You think about the grave goods that were taken, shipped off to museums mislabeled or sold. Pieces of stories without context. Pipes on glass shelves, beads behind UV-protected plastic. But some things stayed. Not the objects, the intention, the echo, because tools for ceremony leave their shape behind even after they're gone. The serpent still holds them in its coil memory. And tonight you felt that shape, not in your hands, but in your bones. You crawl into a side chamber and find it empty. Or is it waiting? By now the night has settled in like a heavy quilt, and you feel it draped over your shoulders as you round the serpent's last loop. The air's gone still. No wind, no whispers from the trees, just the soft crunch of your steps in the grass. Even the insects seem to have paused their nightly concert, as if something important is about to begin and they don't want to miss the opening breath. You follow a slope that dips off the main body of the mound toward a little rise you hadn't noticed before. It's not officially part of the known serpent structure. There's no sign, no rope, no name, but something in the way it sits apart, half concealed by thickets and shadows, draws your attention like a secret, just waiting for someone polite enough to knock. You step closer, and then you see it, a narrow depression in the ground, no wider than a person's shoulders, framed by two stones that don't look quite natural, not carved, not shaped, just placed deliberately. You kneel. The grass here is thicker damp with dew. You run your hand along the edge of the opening and feel a shift in temperature. Cooler, still. As though this space has been untouched for a very, very long time. You lower yourself into the hollow, crawling belly first into the dark. Your fingers brush old roots. The scent of earth deepens, more mineral now, like forgotten stone cellars or buried rain. You move slowly, quietly, like you're not alone. It's not a tunnel, more like a crawl space, a side chamber. A womb in the earth carved by time or hands or both. You reach the center, it's empty, or rather, it's not full. Nothing glitters, no bones, no treasure. Just compacted dirt traces of old ash and the unmistakable silence of expectation. You sit cross-legged, adjusting your weight, trying not to imagine spiders the size of saucers moving behind you. Instead, you breathe. One breath in. The air is cold, almost metallic. One breath out. The silence stretches like fabric. And then something faint, a hum, low and deep, more vibration than sound. You hold your breath to listen. It might be wind tunneling through cracks in the soil, or maybe your own blood echoing through the chambers of your head. But it feels like a signal, like this chamber isn't just a pocket in the dirt, it's a holding place. Here's your historical anchor. Many ancient mounds across the Midwest contain subchambers, small hollows tucked beneath or beside the main burials. Some were used for offerings. Others may have been spirit shelters, temporary resting places for the soul before final transition. Not a tomb, a waiting room. Historians still debate whether these side chambers were always part of the design or formed over time by erosion and root systems. But several contain carefully laid stones suggesting intentionality. A few were found completely empty, and some archaeologists wrote them off as unfinished features. But one fringe belief insists these were void altars, places meant to hold energy, not objects. The absence was offering, the stillness sacred. You sit in that emptiness now and try to feel what it's meant to hold. You don't feel afraid, but you do feel watched, not by eyes, but by memory. Like something once sacred was here, and its outline remains. Like the space remembers the shape of a body that hasn't touched it in 1,000 years. A memory made of absence. You lie back carefully, letting the cool dirt cradle your spine.
Above you, the soil presses in like a low ceiling. The weight is comforting in a strange way. You've stepped inside the lungs of the mound. The breath has been exhaled. Now it's your turn to inhale. You do, and for a moment, just a blink, you see it. Not with your eyes, with your mind. A figure sitting right where you are. Painted face, closed eyes, palms pressed to the floor, waiting, listening, then gone. You blink again, just you, just dirt. But the impression lingers. You crawl back out, slowly emerging into the open air like someone being reborn. You brush soil from your arms and stand up into the moonlight. The chamber is behind you now, empty but not forgotten, and maybe not done. Scholars still argue whether the mound mimics a snake, a spirit, or a stitched-together myth. You emerge from the hollow with the kind of stillness that only comes after being underground.
Not silence exactly, just that pause the world takes when you return from somewhere it didn't send you. You blink under the moon, your skin dusty, your breath shallow. The stars haven't moved, but you feel as though you have. You turn toward the serpent again. It lies there, coiled and calm, tail to head, always watching. But the more you study it, the more uncertain it becomes. That's the trick with ancient things. The closer you look, the more they shift. Snake, yes. But also, no. Here's your historical anchor. The Serpent Mound is widely believed to represent a snake coiled in 7 loops with an open mouth, facing an oval, often interpreted as an egg. Most mainstream scholars agree this is a serpent, a symbol found throughout indigenous iconography across the Americas, especially among the eastern woodlands cultures. But that's just the beginning of the argument, because the serpent isn't just any snake. Some believe it's an eastern diamondback rattlesnake indigenous to the region and sacred in many traditions. Others suggest it's a horned serpent, a mythic being from numerous native legends often associated with underground rivers, wisdom and transformation. Still others see it not as a serpent at all, but as a river or even a comet trail, a thing that moved across the sky and left its mark in the soil. Historians still argue whether this is a literal animal depiction or a cosmological metaphor. Some even argue over the oval egg sun portal eye. One early theory claimed it was a devoured soul halfway consumed by the serpent. You squint at it again. None of the answers feel wrong, but none feel complete. The serpent shifts depending on who's asking, and that's the point. Now your fringe detail, a speculative camp, suggests the mound isn't a serpent at all, but a stitched-together myth, a convergence of multiple cultural stories woven into a single symbol. In this view, the mound is a palimpsest, a spiritual manuscript written, erased, and rewritten over centuries by different peoples, each adding their own meaning to the form. Maybe it began as a burial mound at Dana or earlier. Then came a people who shaped it into a wave, perhaps to reflect the nearby river. And then came others who saw a serpent rising from that wave, chasing an egg or a star or a dream. Each generation etched its own story onto the same sacred line. The result, a creature made not of scales but of layers. You step back and take in the full view once again. The head curves gracefully toward the west, just as the sun would fall. The coils are too symmetrical to be random, too organic to be rigid. You feel like you're looking at a word in a language you almost understand. A syllable from a prayer no one has spoken in 1,000 years. You remember something you read once, that serpents in many cultures represent time. Not just cyclical time, but the kind that eats itself, like the Ouroboros, a snake devouring its own tail, endless and unbroken. Others say serpents guard thresholds between life and death, between seasons, between earth and sky. And here it lies, watching, looping, guarding. You crouch and press your hand once again to the grass. What are you? You don't expect an answer, but something stirs anyway. Maybe the serpent isn't just a snake. Maybe it's a question in the shape of an answer, something meant to keep pulling you forward one coil at a time until you reach the end and realize it's also the beginning. Or maybe it's just a big old snake made by brilliant people who knew the stars better than we know our own inboxes. Both can be true. You stand slowly, Behind you, the oval glows faintly under the moon. Ahead, the coils wind back toward the trees like a path not yet walked. You start moving again, not to escape the mystery, but to stay inside it, because the serpent won't settle for one meaning, and neither should you. An echo from the Shawnee warns of a great serpent rising when the rivers boil. The wind has picked up now, not strong, but steady. The kind that doesn't rattle leaves, but lifts them gently, like someone turning the page of an invisible book. You feel it brush your cheeks, your arms, the back of your neck, and suddenly your ears catch a whisper. Not from the mound, not from the trees, from memory, not yours exactly, but the land's. You remember a story half heard, half felt, from one of the local elders in a nearby town, a Shawnee tale, something old, something that always felt a little too specific. Here's your historical anchor, the Shawnee, along with other native groups like the Lenape and Miami, inhabited the Ohio River Valley long after the mound builders had vanished, but before settlers laid railroad tracks and county lines. They respected the land's sacredness even if its original builders had long gone silent. They didn't claim the serpent as their own, but they recognized it. In their oral traditions passed down across generations, there is mention of a great serpent spirit, a creature coiled beneath the earth whose body shaped the rivers, whose breath formed the mists, and whose anger turned the ground to ash. One tale goes like this: when the rivers boil, the great serpent will rise, not to destroy but to reclaim, not destroy, reclaim. The details shift in each telling. In one, the serpent rises from beneath the Ohio River, shaking off centuries of slumber to wind its body across the land once more. In another, the serpent appears only in spirit, coiling through storms, eclipses, and dreams. In yet another, it's not a monster at all, but a guardian, summoned only when the balance is broken. You sit on a low coil, now tracing the ridge of dirt with your finger, following the story without realizing it. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphorical or tied to real geological events, massive floods, earthquakes, or meteors remembered in mythic form. Some suggest the boiling rivers refer to natural gas seeps or rare geological phenomena. Others think the tale echoes a much older cosmic memory, perhaps even tied to the meteor impact crater beneath your feet. And now the Fringe Flame, one obscure 1930s pamphlet, self-published, naturally claimed that the Serpent Mound was the lock to a great spiritual seal, and when it opens, the ancient knowledge of the Skywalkers will return. The author believed this would happen during a lunar eclipse that coincided with a massive Ohio flood. So far, no dice. But the prediction is still out there, waiting for the rivers to rise and the sky to blush red. You glance toward the river valley to the south. Tonight, it's calm, barely a whisper, reflecting the stars like coins scattered on black silk. But one day, who knows? You wonder how many people have stood where you are now, listening for the hiss beneath the soil, waiting for the breath of the earth to rise. You picture a scene, Shawnee elders gathered near the serpent, telling the tale to younger ones, pointing toward the mound as the fire crackled low. They do not claim to have built it, but they honor it, feed it tobacco, speak to it softly, because the serpent, they say, remembers who respects it. You whisper as if to echo them: when the rivers boil, you will rise. No hiss, no shaking earth, but something in the grass seems to nod. The serpent has always been more than shape. It's warning, it's promise, it's a mirror for what the land remembers and what it refuses to forget. You rise again, The wind shifts once more. The leaves rustle like applause withheld. The stars remain bright. The river still sleeps. But one day, it might not. And when it stirs, when it steams, when the rivers boil, the great serpent may rise again, not in wrath, but in return. In local lore, a silent figure circles the site by moonlight, counting days with each loop. You've been out here long enough to lose track of the hour. Not that it matters. At the Serpent Mound, time doesn't behave normally anyway. It doesn't tick or slide. It coils, it loops. It presses its fingers against your temples and quietly rearranges your sense of sequence. You walk again. The moon is high and soft, casting just enough light to turn everything a shade of silver and shadow. You move along the third coil now, and as you walk, you start to feel accompanied. Not threatened, not watched, just not alone. You stop and glance behind you. No one, of course. But maybe, yes. Here's your historical anchor. Many stories have circulated among nearby towns and families about a lone figure who appears at the mound during full moons. Described in vague terms, tall, cloaked, genderless, always silent, it's not a ghost in the traditional sense. No glowing eyes, no dragging chains, just a presence, known locally as the Watcher of the Coils. Some say it only appears to those who walk the full length of the mound in silence. Others say it appears to children, or those who are grieving, or people who have been marked by the dirt. You haven't figured out if that last one includes you, but it's feeling likely. You start walking again, slower this time. You remember the phrase someone mentioned in a bookstore off Route 73, whispered between sections of dusty genealogy books. It counts for us. You had blinked. Sorry, the man had smiled faintly. The spirit that walks the loops, the one who keeps track, while we forget it, remembers. Historians still debate whether these stories are modern folklore or echoes of a much older belief. The idea that the mound is not only a monument but a timekeeper, and that it needs a walker, a counter, someone to measure the breath between solstices. Maybe the coils aren't just for ritual, maybe they're a calendar, and someone must always walk it loop by loop, marking each turn with intention. You pause at the midpoint, listen. Nothing, just wind, and crickets returning to their midnight chatter. But there's something in the air, a rhythm, faint like footsteps, not following you, just walking the opposite loop, as though the serpent has a built-in companion gliding silently along the other side. You stop trying to sense it and simply let the possibility exist beside you. You don't need to see them, you feel their pace match yours. When you pause, so do they. When you walk, they glide again, never seen, never ahead, never behind, just parallel, as if tethered to your own shadow, but more ancient, more patient. And here's your fringe detail. A few self-proclaimed intuitives have claimed that the Watcher is not a ghost nor a person, but a residual will. A kind of echo left behind by the original builders, not a soul, but a duty. They describe it as a time shadow, a consciousness, tied not to identity, but to task. One even wrote in the journal it doesn't care who you are, it only wants you to walk with it, to count with it, because someone must. You reach the serpent's head again, you don't feel finished, you feel paused, as if there's always more to walk, more loops, more moments, and the figure, whoever or whatever it is already turning back toward the tail, beginning another silent circuit. You bow your head, not out of fear, but respect. Because if there is a spirit here who counts the days, it's not doing it for itself. It's doing it for all of us, for the time we forgot, for the seasons we ignored, for the cycles we lost to calendars and blinking digital clocks. It remembers so we don't lose the rhythm completely. And tonight, for a little while, you walked beside it. Just enough to understand the earth doesn't count in seconds, it counts in circles. In a 19th century dig, someone claimed to find a skull with a melted socket and copper teeth. You make your way down the eastern slope again, this time toward the edge of the wooded bluff where the soil grows rockier and the grass takes on that slightly hesitant look, patchy, sparse. Like even plants know not to get too comfortable here. Something happened in this corner, something that's been talked about in too many half sentences, in too many conflicting footnotes to be fully ignored. You step lightly, the wind's dropped again. It's the hush that comes before certain stories get told. Let's start with the official records. In 1894, during one of the more chaotic excavation seasons at Serpent Mound, a group of gentlemen researchers read curious men in hats and waistcoats with more enthusiasm than training dug into a previously undisturbed section of the mound's inner curve. Their goal? To find something definitive. They wanted prestige, fame, a big headline. What they reported afterward was unusual. According to a letter archived in a small-town historical society, a yellowed, handwritten page signed by a man named A.G. Whitmore, they found a partial human skull with several anomalies. Most notably, one eye socket appeared to have been partially fused, as though melted inward. Several of the remaining teeth were capped with thin bands of copper. The cranial cavity was described as oddly thickened and misshapen, with a note in the margin, reading, simply not deformed, designed. The artifact disappeared. Of course it did. Historians still argue whether the letter was authentic an exaggeration or an outright fabrication. The skull, if it existed, was never catalogued. No photos, no plaster casts. Just that letter and one accompanying sketch that looks like something halfway between forensic art and an uncomfortable guess. You pause now near the area roughly described in the letter. You crouch, press your hand to the earth. It feels colder here, not unfriendly, just reticent. And now your fringe twist. There's a legend rarely told aloud about a being buried beneath the serpent. Not a priest, not a chieftain, something other. The story says it had one eye that could see into the stars and one that had been sealed by fire. The copper wasn't jewelry, it was protection meant to contain whatever this being could speak through its teeth. The story goes that if the mouth were to open, it would tell truths not meant for Earth. You rub your thumb along your palm, the tale was mostly dismissed. Too strange, too myth-soaked. But a few elders still nod when its mentioned eyes narrowing slightly as if to say, we don't talk about that for a reason. Could copper teeth have existed? Actually, yes. Here's your archaeological note. Copper adornments have been found in burials across the ancient Ohio Valley. While not common in the mouth, some grave goods have included copper beads laid between the teeth. Others were tied to burial wrappings around the jaw, possibly to seal the mouth or anoint the speech of the dead. Symbolism matters. The mouth is power, and sometimes it's sealed not to silence but to protect. You stare down at the dirt and wonder. If that skull ever existed, melty socket and all, what was it doing buried here? Who placed it? Who honored it? Who feared it? Or maybe it was never feared. Maybe it was witnessed. Maybe the being wasn't dangerous, just inconvenient. a presence from another understanding of time, a bridge between Earth and elsewhere, a guest that didn't stay long but left behind a shape, a sound, and a mound. You glance at the coils again, that looping grace, spiraling outward like ripples in space. You can't prove the skull was real, but you can feel the spot where the Earth still remembers the weight of something no one wants to explain. You rise and walk back toward the center. And for the first time tonight, you wonder, what happens if something like that comes back? And more importantly, what if it never really left a fringe tale, tells of the coils shining after a lightning strike, natural reaction or divine reply? The sky's been slowly thickening. Not dark, not ominous, just charged. The kind of air that wraps itself around your shoulders like a warning disguised as a blanket. You glance up. No stars are blinking out. No thunder yet. But the hairs on your arms are standing up like small attentive guards. You step carefully along the eastern edge of the mound, the soil underfoot, still dry but humming, quietly. You remember another strange story now, one you read late at night in a forum so obscure it might as well have been scrawled on bark and passed around by crows. A tale told by a camper in the 1970s who claimed to witness something impossible. According to her account, the sky had been crackling all night, dry, lightning, low thunder, not much rain. She was camped just beyond the serpent's tail when a single bolt of lightning struck the mound. Nothing burst, nothing burned. But for a few seconds she swore the serpent glowed, not like a fire, like phosphorescence, like moonlight trapped in water, like a great animal exhaling silver. Here's your mainstream science bite. The Serpent Mound sits in a geologically unique area. It rests above a crypto-explosion structure, a long-buried meteor crater, fractured bedrock, and subtle magnetic anomalies. Some researchers have noted higher-than-average readings in electromagnetic activity here, especially after storms. Add to that the presence of mica, a naturally reflective mineral found in small amounts across the mound's surface, intentionally placed by the builders. Put it all together. In the right conditions, lightning could produce strange effects here. Brief glows, flickering static, ground-level luminescence. Not magic, just science's slightly intoxicated cousin. But science can't explain what the woman said happened next. She wrote it wasn't the lightning that made the mound glow, it was the mound that called the lightning down. Historians naturally call this poetic nonsense, a dramatic retelling, a trick of memory. And yet, there have been other claims. A ranger in the 1990s reported finding glass-like fragments fused into a shallow depression near the serpent's tail, possibly fulgurite or fossilized lightning. They didn't test it. They didn't report it. Just pocketed it, muttered something about weird Ohio geology and moved on. You crouch now, tracing the earth with your fingertips. The moon is hidden behind thin cloud cover, and the air tastes metallic. You rub your hands along the grass and wonder, could the serpent be interactive? Maybe not in the haunted, painting kind of way, but responsive, like a drum that answers only when struck just right. Here's your fringe twist. A handful of esoteric researchers believe the mound acts as a kind of resonant antenna, not just a calendar or a burial marker, but a lightning harvester. A design meant to draw down sky fire and convert it into sacred energy. In this theory, the coils serve as a conductive spiral like copper wire in a primitive transformer. During storms, the serpent receives. During solstices, it broadcasts. Again, this is speculative. No modern experiments have proven it. But the geometry is there, the alignment is suggestive, the mica suspiciously placed. You lean your ear toward the soil. You don't expect anything, and then softly you hear it. No voices, no chant. Just a deep, slow buzz, like a wire pulled taut beneath the earth, like a presence waiting for the right cloud, the right surge, the right second. You sit back unsettled but oddly reassured. The serpent's not dormant, it's charging. You glance at the sky where a pale flash trembles far on the horizon. No thunder follows, not yet, just the echo of possibility. And you wonder how many bolts it's swallowed over the centuries. How many moments the coils pulsed just for a heartbeat glowing in the dark, like a secret catching its breath. Not magic, but not entirely mundane, because some monuments don't just survive storms, they invite them. You lie beside a hollow and feel the presence of someone who once chanted stars into silence. You don't know why you stop. Maybe it's the slight indentation in the soil half covered by grass.
Maybe it's the shift in the wind like a whisper brushing the back of your neck. Maybe it's just instinct, the kind that lives in your ribs, not your mind. But you stop and you lower yourself into the grass beside a shallow hollow tucked along the second coil from the head. It doesn't look like much, just a dip in the land, no stones, no carvings, no signs. But the silence here is different, not empty, attentive. You lie down, careful not to crush the blades of grass. The earth welcomes you, not warm, not cold, just steady. You settle into the curve like someone curling into an old story, and as your body adjusts, your breath slows. That's when you feel it. Not fear, not even presence, just remembrance. Like someone once lay here exactly as you are now, eyes closed, listening not for birdsong or wind, but for the spaces between the stars.
Here's your historical anchor at sites across the ancient Ohio River Valley. Archaeologists have uncovered small ceremonial hollows and sitting pits believed to have been used in solitary rites. These weren't burials, they were spaces set aside for chant, for trance, for communion with what the sky might be saying. Sometimes those who sat in them were astronomer priests, sometimes dreamers, and sometimes simply those chosen to listen. Historians still argue whether such rites were widespread or specific to certain clans or spiritual leaders. But among many traditions, a hollow was a kind of lens not for seeing outward but inward, a grounded telescope for the soul. You rest your head on your folded arms and close your eyes. Darkness doesn't fall. It blossoms. You're not asleep, but you're somewhere else. You begin to hear the stars. Not like music, not like voices. Just a pattern, a pressure. A soft folding and unfolding of rhythm.
And beside you, not touching, not visible, is someone else. You don't turn, you don't have to, you know them. Their body is wrapped in fur and thread. Their hair is braided tight against their scalp. Their hands are resting gently on the earth. One finger traces an invisible pattern through the grass, keeping time with something you cannot name. They are chanting, soft, measured, like wind moving across water. But the chant isn't meant for people. It's meant for the stars, to calm them, to steady their turning, to mark their place so that seasons don't collapse into each other, to keep time still enough for memory to land. This is your fringe detail. A speculative school of archaeoastronomers suggests that ancient ceremonial sites weren't just passive observatories, they were instruments, not just for marking solstices, but for stabilizing cosmic cycles. Chanting wasn't decorative, it was functional. It reinforced rhythm, cosmic resonance through sound, soil, and presence.
You can't prove it. But lying here, the land beneath you seems to exhale in sync with the sky above. You feel your heart slowing, matching some rhythm that began long before you arrived, and will continue long after you're gone. You let go. And in that space, that brief hush, between inhale and exhale, you feel what the person beside you once did. Everything is watching, and nothing needs to be hurried, because the stars won't fall, not while someone is singing them still. You open your eyes. The presence beside you is gone, but the chant still echoes deep in your chest. Not as words, just a feeling. You sit up, slowly. The moon is higher now, and the hollow beside you, still faint in the grass, seems just a little deeper than before. As if your body filled in a pattern it already knew. You place your hand over your chest. Your heartbeat is steady, and the stars above still turning. Winter reveals things. Summer hides outline symbols and small bones rising like teeth. The air shifts again. Not colder, not yet. But you feel the hint of it, the way dew thickens into frost, the way trees start whispering about letting go. And though it's still the middle of the night, your thoughts drift toward winter. Not just the season, the state. The mound, for all its presence, doesn't always look the same. In summer, it's a lush ribbon coils hidden under thick grass, leafy cover, buzzing insects and shade. It's alive but crowded. Details blur beneath wildflowers and sun. But in winter, when the green dies back and the trees bare their bones, the serpent shows its ribs. You imagine it now, the earth frozen stiff, the grass thinned to tufts, frost limning every curve of the coils like sugar on the rim of an ancient chalice. And in that starkness, lines appear. You don't just see the serpent, you see the decisions, the structure, the craftsmanship. Here's your historical anchor. Archaeologists and surveyors have long noted that winter is the best time to study the Serpent Mound, not because it's easier to access, quite the opposite, but because the reduced vegetation reveals secondary mounds, subtle depressions and linear alignments not visible in lush seasons. In fact, some of the earliest detailed maps of the site, made in the late 1800s, were sketched during cold months. The frost outlined paths no one had noticed before. Straight lines, tiny pits, even strange symbols stamped into the soil by time and feet and memory. You imagine walking here on a snowy morning, each coil outlined like calligraphy drawn in white. Animal tracks crossing the loops. And then closer to the head, you see something small poking up from the snow. A bone. No bigger than a finger, clean, pale, rising like a tooth, not human, not threatening, just waiting. Historians still argue whether the bones that surface in winter are the result of animal burials erosion, or the subtle shifting of ceremonial offerings returning to light. Some say they're deer bones left from feasts or rites. Others suspect they were placed deliberately, a kind of breadcrumb trail guiding the spirit to the stars and back again. One old note from a 1922 dig mentions finding 3 tiny jawbones in a perfect triangle exposed by snowmelt and left untouched, as if whoever buried them expected winter to reveal them. You press your hand to the ground. It's not snowing now, but the earth feels ready, as if it knows the season is turning. Here's your fringe moment, a theory from a now out-of-print book titled The Bones of Winter, argues that the serpent's true purpose is only visible when the world goes still. The author claimed that solstice frost activates the mound's memory, tracing its lines like circuits, completing patterns that sunlight hides. She claimed to have seen runes of ice along the serpent spine, spirals, tracks, letters, not written by any alphabet we know. Of course, no one ever verified that, but part of you wants to come back here after the first snow, not to test the theory, just to listen better. You lie down again this time, curled on your side, near the 5th loop. You imagine what it would be like here in December, your breath fogging in the air, your fingertips going numb, your eyes squinting into a silver dawn. And then as the sun hits the serpent's head, maybe you'd see it. Not just a monument, a map, a winter-lit constellation drawn on land, and perhaps a message. One only revealed when the world has gone quiet enough to hear the bones speak. You sit up slowly. There's no frost tonight, but the grass beneath your hand feels cooler than it did an hour ago. And just for a moment you swear you see your own breath rising, though the air is still. Winter is coming, and the serpent, it remembers how to shine through silence. At dawn once, someone buried a bundle wrapped in feathers, string, and soot. You shift your weight and glance toward the eastern horizon. It's still night, but the sky has softened just a touch. That silvery bruise before the blue. The kind of light that doesn't come from the sun yet, but from the promise of it. And with that promise comes a memory not yours, but one whispered from the coils folded between the roots of the mound. A scene you didn't witness but can almost smell. Smoke, damp soil, feathers. You follow the curve of the serpent back toward the tail, where the ground levels and the trees thin. This is where it happened. You don't know how you know, but you do. Someone came here at dawn once, just as the first light spilled over the rim of the trees. No procession, no crowd, just 2 people. One older, one younger, their shadows long and stretched. They carried something wrapped in a small bundle. Not large, not flashy, no gold, no jewels, just a package swaddled in woven cloth tied with string, stitched with soot, and lined with feathers, the soft kind from under the wing where birds hide warmth. Here's your historical anchor. Many ancient burials in Ohio Valley mound cultures included bundles. These were sacred packages, often composed of symbolic items, feathers, string, pigment stones, herbs. Some were clearly ceremonial, others looked like personal objects, buttons made of bone, tiny carved animals, tightly wound cords of sinew or hair. Historians still argue whether these bundles were offerings for the dead, messages to the spirits, or gifts meant for later return. But nearly all agree they mattered deeply. You didn't bury something in a bundle unless you wanted it remembered. The 2 figures in your memory, whether imagination or inherited dream, kneel together. The older one speaks softly, not in chant, but in that half-speech used when telling the earth something important. They open the ground gently, not with tools, with hands, and the younger one places the bundle in the hollow, then presses their forehead to the soil beside it. You lean down now, mimicking the motion. The grass is damp. The dirt beneath is cool, just as it would have been that morning. And then the older figure seals it, presses the earth back into place, not patting it down, but stroking it like closing the eyes of someone sleeping. They do not mark the spot, no stones, no sticks, just memory and soot. Your fringe detail in a rare excavation report from the 1930s, a note describes an unusual soot-stained depression found near the tail of the mound. No bones, no metal. just ash embedded into the soil, arranged in a narrow oval with feathers still partially intact, flattened but preserved. The report dismisses it as the remains of a small fire pit. But the orientation was wrong for a hearth, and the lack of charcoal or charred wood suggests this wasn't a blaze. It was a burial, but of what? Perhaps not a person. Perhaps something else. A message, a vow, a piece of someone's breath wrapped in feathers so it could fly when the soil released it. You run your hands over the grass here, feeling for any trace. You won't find it. It's gone. And yet, the soil here feels warmer, almost like the ground is still holding its breath. You sit beside the invisible bundle, watch the sky grow lighter one heartbeat at a time. You think of all the things we bury that aren't bodies, grief, wishes, secrets, and maybe, just maybe, promises. Maybe the serpent isn't just a guardian of the dead, but a keeper of these buried truths. Maybe every coil holds a bundle, not marked, not catalogued, just waiting for someone gentle enough to remember without digging. You place your hand on the ground
and whisper, "Just once I won't forget you." A modern medium once heard singing here 3 notes repeated rising from underground. The morning has begun its quiet approach, but the sky remains drowsy, an old cat of a horizon, stretching one paw of pink into the grey. You're seated now, legs folded, palms pressed to the cool earth, just off the 3rd loop from the head, and something's humming. Not a vibration, not a sensation, a tune. You can't explain it and you don't try. You just listen. 3 notes, low, low, high, then silence, then again, low, low, high. They aren't coming from the trees. They aren't carried by wind. They're coming up. Here's your historical anchor. Oral traditions across the ancient Americas often connect burial sites with music, not just performance, but spiritual resonance. Ancient instruments like bone flutes, panpipes, rattles, and drums have been found in mound sites across the Midwest. These weren't concert pieces, they were tools.
Conduits, instruments of alignment. And here near Serpent Mound, music continues to trickle through local lore. In 1986, during a community gathering at the Mound's equinox alignment, a woman described as a reluctant medium sat quietly on a mat near the serpent's head. She wasn't performing. She wasn't even announced, but just before sunrise she stood and turned to no one in particular. "They're singing," she said. When asked who, she simply whispered, "The 3 that wait." Witnesses say she then began to hum, 3 notes, soft and steady. Ooh, not loud, not eerie, but familiar like a lullaby you didn't know you knew. Historians, of course, raise eyebrows. There's no record of the event outside a single newsletter and a cassette tape passed between friends. But the notes, the pattern resurface. Hikers have reported hearing the same tones during early morning fog. A child once sang them to her mother after playing near the base of the mound, claiming the ground taught me. No recording, just stories, echoes. You sit quietly now, letting your own breath slow. Ooh, you're not imagining it. There it is, faint beneath the crickets. And here's your fringe twist. Some fringe researchers suggest the Serpent Mound wasn't just a visual monument, but a sonic one designed to amplify or resonate with particular frequencies. One engineer recorded low-band vibrations across the site in the 1990s and claimed certain coils sang back when tones were played near them. He even mapped the acoustics and found 3 points where notes produced harmonic reinforcement, natural echo chambers underground. Guess what you're sitting on one now. You lie back gently, head to the soil ears, toward the heartbeat of the ground. And you hear it again. Low, low, high, like breath, like memory, like three figures humming from a place not quite here, not quite gone. You don't need to know what it means. Some songs don't explain themselves. Some voices don't rise for everyone. But if you're quiet enough and the morning's slow enough and the coils remember your feet, you might hear it too. A song older than stone, a lullaby for the stars. You hum it once under your breath, not an imitation, a response. And for one soft moment, you swear the third note doesn't come from you. Under a hidden slab, a lost surveyor etched a spiral with no center. The sun is close now, just beneath the horizon, turning the undersides of clouds peach and bronze. You're moving slowly, deliberately, like someone finishing a ritual they didn't realize they started. You walk along the northern edge of the mound where the grass thickens again and the soil feels older somehow. Less walked, less known. A place where even the serpent seems to pull in, holding its breath. And that's when you see it, a slab of stone half buried beneath a tangle of roots and time, not part of the visible mound, not in any of the maps you've seen. It doesn't stick up, it sinks in, subtle, shy, but deliberate. You crouch, run your fingers over the surface, smooth but not polished, a flat sandstone large enough to have once served as a marker, or a seat, or a lid. You brush away a layer of soil, then another, and there it is, etched faintly as if by a finger or a dull blade, is a spiral winding inward curve after curve, tighter and tighter. But there's no center. It ends in air. Here's your historical anchor. In 1907, a surveyor named Elias Brower documented lesser-known features of the Serpent Mound region. In a fragment of a field journal found decades later in a box of unsorted notes, he described an anomalous stone flat to the northeast of the main coils on which he observed a delicate spiral engraving seeming unfinished or deliberately absent at the point of origin. He didn't include it in his published notes. He wrote only spiral with no center, perhaps not unfinished, but representing absence as axis. Historians still argue whether Brower fabricated the entry. No one's found the stone since. No official excavation has confirmed it. Most believe it was imagination or a smudge misread as symbol, but you're sitting on it now. And the spiral is real. You trace it slowly with your fingertip. It doesn't feel like a symbol meant to be read. It feels like a gesture meant to be repeated. Here's your fringe note in some indigenous cosmologies, especially those of the Mississippian peoples. The spiral wasn't a path inward, it was a doorway, and the absence of a center wasn't a mistake. It was the point. A place where spirit moved through, where form broke into formlessness. Some traditions say a spiral without a center is a promise that return is possible, but only if you let go of the need to arrive. You press your palm flat against the spiral now, and suddenly you feel weightless, only for a moment, like your body sinks an inch into the stone, not physically but emotionally, like something ancient just exhaled beneath you. You pull your hand back and breathe out slowly. Not because you're afraid, because you've just touched something that doesn't need to explain itself. The sun edges over the hills, now bleeding light across the valley. The serpent glows faintly in gold, and the slab at your feet catches none of it. It stays in shadow, not ominous, just private. You dust the stone gently, let the soil cover the spiral once more. It doesn't belong on display, it belongs remembered, not revealed. You rise, you don't take a photo, you don't mark the GPS, you just walk away like the spiral asked you to. And somehow you know you'll carry its shape for the rest of your life, even if no one else ever sees it. Local children whisper that if you sleep inside the coils, you dream someone else's life. The grass is gold now, lit by the early sun. Shadows stretch long, wrapping around the mound's coils like lazy cats sunbathing in ancient geometry. The air feels lighter, warmer, but not safer. Just awake. You walk along the western side, tracing a curve with your toe, and remember something a park ranger once muttered to a friend when he thought no one was listening. Don't let the kids nap on the mound. They dream too hard. It sounded silly at the time, campfire folklore, but then you heard the same thing from a librarian and a retired school teacher and a teenager with eyes just a little too wide for someone who claims not to believe in anything. The whispers are persistent. Sleep inside the serpent's coils and you'll dream a life that's not your own. Here's your historical anchor, the indigenous peoples of this region, Adena, Hopewell and others whose names have been forgotten, held a rich tradition of dreaming as guidance, vision quests, dream fasting, symbolic sleeping beneath sacred trees or near water. Sleep wasn't passive, it was a conversation, a test, sometimes even a journey. What makes the serpent special is that it doesn't just lie on the land, it shapes it. The earth here curves around you in intentional ways, rising and falling, hugging your spine if you lie flat. The coils create natural hollows where a body can rest each loop, a cradle. And some kids, whether brave or just curious, have snuck in at night and done just that. You sit in one of those hollows now. The grass here is thicker, softer. The birds have begun singing, but faintly, like they don't want to interrupt. You lower yourself gently and close your eyes just for a second. You don't expect anything. And then you're not here anymore. You're standing barefoot near a fire, surrounded by people in woven shawls and deer-hide robes. There are no words, just movement, smoke, music, made from bone and breath. You reach down and pick up a carved object from the earth, a pipe shaped like a bird. You blow gently into it and it sings, not a note, a memory. A hand touches your shoulder. You turn, and it's you, not the current you, the you from 1,000 years ago. Same eyes, same tilt of the jaw, but dressed in story. And just as suddenly you're back, the bird song is louder now, the sun is higher, the wind smells like warm pine. You sit up slowly, brushing grass from your arms. No visions, no dizziness. Just a lingering question, was that a dream? Or did the serpent loan you a memory? Historians still argue whether dreams can be considered legitimate sources of cultural transmission. Some call them fantasy. Others call them ancestral data passed through instinct and sleep. But among the people who built this place, dreams were navigation. And dreaming here, that was something else entirely. Here's your fringe detail. One early visitor to the mound in the 1920s wrote in a forgotten zine that after sleeping on the third coil, she awoke knowing how to sing a chant in a language she'd never studied. When she hummed it for a native elder decades later, he reportedly wept. She didn't publish it. She just whispered the tune once more and let it fade. You stand steady now and glance back at the hollow. It looks ordinary again, but you know better. Some places are doorways, not made of wood or stone, but of sleep. The kind of sleep that doesn't rest, but retrieves. So if you ever lie here, wrapped inside one of these ancient loops, be ready. You might dream, but it may not be your dream. A strange map found in a bookshop showed the serpent coiled through a star chart. You're walking now with the sun at your back, the light soft and golden, casting long, deliberate shadows that stretch across the coils like quiet fingers. The serpent looks different by day, less dream, more monument, less mystery, more muscle, and yet not less strange. You climb a gentle rise near the midpoint of the mound where the curve opens slightly and the grass flattens out like a palm. You stop and glance up at the sky as if expecting something to be written there. You remember a map. Not the usual kind, not topographic, not archaeological. You found it years ago tucked inside a book that wasn't about Ohio at all. A slim volume on ancient symbols sold for $3 at a dusty, second-hand shop 2 states over. You almost didn't open it, but when you did, there it was, a fold-out sheet tucked into the back, handmade, inked with care. No words, just a drawing. It showed the Serpent Mound. You recognized the curves immediately, but superimposed over it was something else. A star chart. Faint dots, lines, constellations, but not as we name them now. You traced the image slowly, then faster. The serpent's head aligned perfectly with a cluster of stars that might have been Vega. One coil curled along the line of what looked like the Milky Way. Another loop mimicked the arc of Lyra. The tail seemed to terminate not in soil, but in deep space. Here's your historical anchor. Some archaeoastronomers believe the Serpent Mound was deliberately aligned with celestial events, particularly the summer solstice sunset and possibly lunar standstills. The mound's curves may also reflect cycles of Venus or even comet paths. Nothing confirmed, but the patterns are compelling. Historians still argue whether these alignments were symbolic or functional. Did they track time map seasons, communicate with the sky, or were they reminders that we are part of a much larger spiral? The fringe detail that map you found when you showed it to a friend fluent in old star lore, they noticed something you hadn't, a spiral constellation you didn't recognize, one not listed in any standard charts. When overlaid with the serpent, it matched the curves perfectly, but only in reverse, as if the mound wasn't beneath the stars but mirroring something that had already coiled across the sky long before anyone dug into this soil. You kneel now and trace the coil at your feet. It bends gently, just like a curve on that map. And you wonder, what if this wasn't built to represent the stars? What if it was built to anchor them? What if, in some way, we've forgotten this mound is a grounding wire for the cosmos, a place to hold the stars steady, or to remind us where we came from? You lie back in the grass, the map now only in memory. Above you, the sky opens wide, blue and soft and infinite. But the serpent lies below you, silent, reflecting something older than memory. A constellation not drawn in light, but in earth. Someone once claimed to follow a trail of tiny carved stones from the tail into a dream. The day has fully arrived now. The light is clear, clean, and almost too normal after the night you've spent here. The serpent lies in full view, no longer glowing, no longer whispering, just being. And yet you sense it hasn't gone silent. It's just letting you decide what to believe. You move toward the tail where the coils first begin their slow, elegant dance. It's the start of the shape, if start even means anything here, the place where the first intention might have been pressed into the dirt. And there, near the base of the first rise, your eyes catch a glint. Not bright, not obvious, just enough to make you pause. You kneel and see it, a tiny stone no bigger than your thumbnail resting half buried in the grass, smooth, dark, and carved. A single spiral not unlike the one you saw on the slab, but tighter, more precise. You pick it up, feel the weight, and then another. A few feet away, then another, a trail. Here's your historical anchor. In 1948, an amateur folklorist named Harold Kinsey claimed to have found a deliberate line of carved pebbles leading away from the serpent's tail. He described them as bearing primitive markings, spirals, crosshatches, sunbursts. He followed them for nearly a mile before they disappeared into a creek bed. No one else reported them. His notes were ridiculed, but Harold insisted until his death that the stones were a path of thought laid for those who knew how to walk dreams while awake. You walk slowly now, eyes scanning the grass. There's another, then another. You don't speak. You don't call it out, because something about this feels private. Almost like you're reading a sentence someone wrote just for you. And then you stop. Not because the stones stop, but because something changes in your body. A stillness. A pressure behind your eyes, like sleep, but sharper. You crouch, close your eyes, and fall forward into a moment that isn't here. You're somewhere else, walking through tall trees, moonlight catching on bark that shines like old silver. You're barefoot, carrying something small in your hand, a bundle maybe. You don't know where you're going, but the path is lined with spirals carved into the stones, and each one pulses gently like a slow heartbeat. You follow, you walk deeper. And in the center of the dream you reach a clearing. At its center, the serpent, but made of light, not earth. Floating, breathing. And then just once it turns its head toward you. It doesn't speak, it just opens its mouth, and inside there's a mirror. Not of your face,
but of your memory. You see yourself here now, kneeling at the tail, holding a stone. You exhale sharply and jolt awake. You're back. The sun is above the trees now. Birds are louder. The serpent is still. But in your hand, the stone remains. Historians still argue whether carved stones found near ceremonial sites were religious tools, children's toys, or simply markers left by the dead. Some say they're trail signs, others say they're just random erosion, but none of them have followed one into a dream. Your fringe detail, Kinsey once wrote in his journal that he believed the stones weren't meant to be collected, but to guide someone specific at a specific moment when the mound was ready. You wonder if he ever made it to the clearing. You wonder if you just did. You pocket the stone, not to keep, but to carry. Because some stories don't end at the mound. They spiral outward, like dreams that remember you.
Beneath your hand, the earth breathes and the serpent sighs once, as if remembering you. You sit now at the base of the serpent's head, just beyond the open jaws and the oval-shaped earthwork that scholars still puzzle over. The grass here is warmer, kissed by the full light of morning, and the shadow of your body stretches long and soft down the slope. You're not ready to leave. Not yet. You place your palm flat against the soil, and there it is, a pulse. Not a drumbeat, not a thump. Just the barest shift, like breath rising through a sleeping chest. Slow, steady, patient, you press more firmly, and for one strange moment you swear the soil beneath you sighs like something deep and old just let go of a breath it had been holding for a very long time. You don't flinch. You just breathe with it. Here's your historical anchor. The Serpent Mound's precise construction required a remarkable understanding of soil layers, compaction, and seasonal shifts. Its undulating shape has held for over 1,000 years through floods, freezes, and countless curious feat, not by accident, but by design. Historians still argue whether the builders used specialized surveying tools, oral memory, celestial cues, or all three. But no one debates the outcome. It's enduring. More than engineering, almost intention. And here's your fringe detail. A few modern mystics believe the mound isn't just a symbol or structure, it's a being. Dormant, yes. Quiet, yes. But alive in its own slow, ceremonial rhythm. Some call it the earth serpent. Others say it's a memory gate. One poet called it the last breath of a vanished mind made visible in clay. You sit with that idea now. You've walked the coils. You've heard the notes, you've traced spirals, dreamt memories, followed stone trails, and truly felt that you were witnessing something, not just observing it. And now you let the silence wash over you. Not empty silence, sacred silence. The kind that doesn't demand understanding, only presence. The serpent doesn't speak. It doesn't need to. Because it remembers you, the weight of your steps, the quiet of your breath, the moment your palm pressed into the soil, and for one heartbeat your rhythm and its rhythm matched. You wonder, as you rise, what you'll carry back with you. Not just facts or stories, but something subtler, the feeling that the world is not flat, that time is not a line, that your body remembers things your mind doesn't yet know. And the serpent, it doesn't need to be deciphered, it only needs to be visited. You walk back along the path toward the parking lot. The birdsong grows sharper, the sky shifts to full blue. You do not look back, because the serpent isn't behind you, it's with you, coiled in thought, looped in memory, and somewhere just beneath your ribcage, something echoes the way it breathes. You don't know what spirit was buried here, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't buried at all. Maybe it's been waiting for you. The light is soft now, and so are your limbs. The wind nudges the trees gently, and the coils of the mound fade behind your eyes. You've walked them. You've followed every curve, every breath, every whisper between the soil and the sky. And now, you rest. Let the serpent's rhythm linger in your chest. Let it coil quietly behind your thoughts like a soft string tied to a place that still hums beneath your feet. You don't need to remember every step you took. The earth remembers for you. The dreams, the spirals, the stars you carried in your eyes, they're folded now, tucked into the quiet corners of your mind. Your breathing slows. The world hushes, and if you listen closely, you might still hear it. That hum. That lullaby made of dirt and light and stories too old to be written. Let it rock you. Let it wrap around you. Let the coils cradle you like the hollow beneath the stars where memory rests with one eye open and the other closed in peace. Sleep now. You are not lost. You are not alone. You are only returning to the place that knew you before you knew yourself, to the whisper in the mound, to the breath beneath the earth, to the dream that remembers your name. End of script. Sweet dreams.